The moment Victoria Langford's $1,000 coffee splashed across the construction worker's jacket, she had no idea she'd just humiliated the one man who could destroy her career with a single phone call. That freezing Chicago morning would become the most expensive mistake of her life. Not in money, but in something far more valuable. Before you find out how a 6-year-old girl in a worn blueprint folder brought a billionaire CEO to her knees, make sure to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The wind off Lake Michigan hit like a freight train that morning, carrying snow sideways through the canyon of downtown Chicago's financial district. It was the kind of cold that made your bones ache, the kind that separated locals from transplants in about 30 seconds. Nathan Carter didn't mind it. He'd grown up with these winters, learned to lean into the wind instead of fighting it, learned that complaining about weather you couldn't change was just wasted breath. He adjusted his grip on Emma's small hand as they approached Blackstone Plaza, the blueprints under his other arm threatening to escape with every gust. The building rose 60 stories above them, all steel and glass and money, reflecting the gray morning sky like a mirror someone had forgotten to clean. "Daddy, my face is freezing off," Emma announced, her words muffled by the scarf wrapped 3 times around her neck. Only her eyes were visible, bright and curious despite the weather. "Faces don't freeze off, Bug," Nathan said, though he pulled her closer to his side, trying to block some of the wind with his body. "We're almost there." "How do you know?" "Because I can see the door right there." "But how do you know faces don't freeze off? Have you ever seen someone whose face froze off?" Nathan couldn't help smiling. This was Emma's new thing, questioning everything with the relentless logic of a 6-year-old who'd just discovered that adults didn't actually know everything. "That's a fair point, but I'm pretty confident about this one." "Confidence isn't the same as knowledge, Daddy. Miss Patterson says it." "Miss Patterson is creating a monster," Nathan muttered, but there was affection in it. Emma's kindergarten teacher had apparently decided that critical thinking skills should start early. Real early. They pushed through the revolving door into Blackstone Plaza's lobby, and the temperature changed so fast Nathan's glasses fogged immediately. He stopped just inside, letting his vision clear, trying not to drip melting snow all over the marble floor. The lobby was massive, 3 stories of polished stone and indirect lighting, designed to make you feel small and insignificant the moment you walked in. It worked. The morning rush was in full swing. Men and women in suits that probably cost more than Nathan's truck hurried across the lobby like schools of expensive fish, all swimming in the same direction, none of them making eye contact. Their shoes clicked against the marble in a rhythm that sounded almost rehearsed. "Wow," Emma breathed, unwinding her scarf and staring up at the ceiling. "It's like a palace." "It's just a building, Em. A really, really fancy building." She spotted the security desk where a bored-looking guard was checking IDs. "Do we need special permission to be here?" "Something like that." Nathan glanced at his watch. 7:47 a.m. The meeting was at 8, which meant he had exactly 13 minutes to get to the 40th floor. Plenty of time, except his appearance was going to raise questions. The security desk, the executive assistants on 40, maybe even in the elevator. Everyone was going to wonder what a guy in a construction jacket was doing in a place like this. He dressed this way on purpose, actually. Could have worn a suit, could have played the part everyone expected. But there was something about these meetings that always made him want to show up exactly as he was. Maybe it was stubborn. Maybe it was a test. Maybe he was just tired of pretending to be something he wasn't for other people's comfort. "Stay close," he told Emma, starting across the lobby. They made it maybe 20 feet before someone slammed into him from the side. Not hard. Just the distracted collision of 2 people not paying attention in a crowded space. But the timing was spectacularly bad. The woman who'd hit him was carrying a coffee cup, one of those enormous paper ones from the cafe on the ground floor, and the impact sent it flying. The lid popped off mid-air, and what felt like a gallon of hot coffee splashed across Nathan's jacket and down his jeans. "Jesus!" The word was out before he could stop it. Emma jumped back, eyes wide. "Daddy!" "I'm fine, Bug. I'm fine." The coffee was hot, but not scalding, already cooling in the air-conditioned lobby. Nathan looked down at himself, the dark stain spreading across his jacket, dripping onto the marble floor. "Great. Just great. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I wasn't. The woman stopped mid-sentence. Nathan looked up, ready to say it was fine. Accidents happen, no big deal. But the apology died on his lips when he saw her face. She wasn't sorry, not even a little bit. The woman staring at him was maybe 30, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Nathan made in a month. Dark hair pulled back tight, makeup precise, everything about her screaming money and control. But it was her eyes that caught him, cold and calculating, already making judgments, already deciding exactly who he was based on his stained jacket and work boots. "You should watch where you're going," she said, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. Nathan blinked. "I should... You ran into me. I was walking. You stopped in the middle of the lobby." She glanced at the coffee spreading across the marble. "This floor is Italian Carrara marble. Each tile costs more than..." She stopped, looking at him again, really looking this time, taking in the construction jacket, the worn jeans, the blueprints under his arm. Her expression shifted from annoyance to something worse, pity mixed with contempt. "Never mind, you probably don't understand." The lobby had gone quiet around them. Not completely, there were still people rushing past, still phones ringing somewhere in the distance. But a circle had formed. People had stopped to watch. That particular kind of stopped where they pretend they're not watching while watching very carefully. Nathan felt Emma's hand tighten in his. She was smart enough to sense the tension, even if she didn't understand it. "I understand marble," Nathan said evenly. "I also understand when someone's being..." "Daddy?" Emma's voice was small. "Your jacket's all wet." The woman's gaze dropped to Emma for the first time, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that Nathan had a kid with him. Or maybe she was just calculating the cost of a 6-year-old in a building like this. "You brought a child here?" The woman's voice had shifted, taken on a different edge. "To a business building? During the workday?" "It's 7:48 in the morning," Nathan said. "And she's with me, so yes." "Does she not have school?" "Does she..." Nathan stopped, feeling his jaw tighten. "I don't think that's any of your business. I'm simply wondering if this is appropriate." The woman glanced around the lobby, as if looking for support, and found it in the faces watching them. A child in a professional environment, a man who clearly doesn't work here, wandering around the building. "We're not wandering. Dripping coffee on floors that cost more than most people's cars. You spilled the coffee. And frankly, I have to question whether someone in your situation should be bringing a child to a place like this at all." She said it quietly, almost gently, which somehow made it worse. "There are programs, you know, resources. For single fathers who are struggling." The lobby wasn't just quiet anymore. It was dead silent. Nathan felt something cold settle in his chest, something that had nothing to do with the wet jacket. He'd dealt with judgment before, dealt with people making assumptions about him based on how he looked or what he did for a living. Usually he let it roll off, not worth the energy to argue. But this was different. This woman had just questioned his ability to raise his own daughter, and she'd done it in front of Emma. "Programs," Nathan repeated. "Yes. I'm sure if you spoke to building security, they could direct you." "I don't need programs." His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was steel underneath now. "And I definitely don't need parenting advice from someone who spills coffee on people and then acts like it's their fault." The woman's face flushed slightly. "I was trying to help." "You were trying to make yourself feel better." Nathan shifted the blueprints under his arm, very aware of Emma standing beside him, very aware of the dozen people pretending not to listen. "You made a mistake, spilled your coffee, and instead of just apologizing like a normal person, you decided to turn it into a lesson about how I don't belong here, how my daughter doesn't belong here. Because of what? My jacket? My boots?" "I never said..." "You didn't have to say it. It's written all over your face." Nathan looked directly at her, and for the first time since the collision, the woman seemed unsure. "You see a guy in work clothes with a kid, and you fill in the rest yourself. Single dad, probably struggling, probably doesn't have his life together, probably shouldn't be in a building this nice. Am I close?" The woman's mouth opened, closed. "You're being dramatic." "Am I? This is absurd. I don't have time for..." She checked her watch, an expensive thing that caught the light. I have a meeting on 40 in 10 minutes, and I'm not going to stand here being lectured by someone who... Someone who what? Nathan's voice was still quiet, but Emma could feel his hand trembling slightly in hers. Go ahead. Finish that sentence. The woman's eyes narrowed. Someone who clearly has no idea how this building works, how these spaces function. There are standards, expectations. Standards, Nathan nodded slowly. Right, and I'm not meeting them because of my jacket. Because of your entire presentation, the woman corrected, her composure returning. This is Blackstone Plaza, one of the premier business addresses in Chicago. The people who come here, who work here, who do business here, they understand what that means. They understand the level of professionalism required. And I don't. I didn't say that, but you're thinking it. Nathan glanced down at Emma, who was staring up at the woman with the kind of unfiltered curiosity that only kids could pull off. What do you think, Bug? Do we meet the standards? Emma considered this seriously. I don't know what standards are. It means whether we're good enough to be here. Oh. Emma looked at the woman, then back at Nathan. Are we? That's what we're trying to figure out. The woman made an impatient sound. This is ridiculous. I don't have time to stand here debating. Then don't. Nathan's voice was calm, almost gentle. Apologize for spilling coffee on me, and we can both get on with our days. The lobby was so quiet now you could hear the ventilation system humming overhead. People had stopped even pretending to walk past. They were just standing there, phones in hand, watching this confrontation like it was street theater. The woman stared at Nathan for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she glanced around at the watching faces, seeming to remember where she was, who might be watching. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. I apologize for the coffee. Each word sounded like it cost her something. It was an accident. And the rest of it? The rest of what? The part where you question my parenting, my right to be here, whether my daughter belongs in a building this nice. The woman's jaw tightened. I was simply expressing concern. You were judging us. There's a difference. For a moment, Nathan thought she might actually acknowledge it, might actually take responsibility for more than just the spilled coffee. But then her expression hardened, walls going up, and he knew the moment had passed. I have a meeting, she said curtly. Excuse me. She turned and walked toward the elevators, heels clicking against the marble, leaving Nathan and Emma standing in a puddle of cooling coffee while the lobby slowly came back to life around them. Emma tugged on Nathan's hand. Daddy, are you okay? Yeah, Bug, I'm fine. He wasn't, not really, but that wasn't Emma's problem to carry. She was mean. She was complicated. Nathan looked down at his stained jacket, the blueprints somehow still dry under his arm. People get weird in places like this. They forget how to be decent. Because of the standards? Nathan smiled despite himself. Something like that. A security guard approached, an older guy with kind eyes and a name tag that read Marcus. Sir? You all right? Need any help? I'm good, Marcus, thanks. Marcus glanced at this coffee on the floor, then at Nathan's jacket, then toward the elevators where the woman had disappeared. That was Ms. Langford. She's intense. Langford. The name meant nothing to Nathan, but he filed it away anyway. Victoria Langford, CEO of Langford Capital. They're trying to acquire the building. Marcus lowered his voice, even though there was no one close enough to hear. Between you and me, sir, she's been coming here for months. Always acts like she already owns the place. Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. She's trying to buy Blackstone Plaza? That's what I heard. Big meeting today, actually. Supposed to finalize everything. Marcus pulled out a radio. I can have maintenance come clean this up. If you want to head... I've got a meeting on 40, Nathan said. Need to get moving. Marcus looked skeptical. On 40? Sir, that's executive level. Restricted access. Unless you've got... Nathan reached into his jacket pocket, the dry side, and pulled out a key card. Not one of the standard visitor passes, but a black card with gold lettering that caught the light. Marcus's eyes widened. I didn't... Mr. Carter, I apologize. I didn't recognize. It's fine, Marcus, really. Nathan slipped the card back into his pocket. The whole point is that people don't recognize me. Makes life more interesting. Still, sir, after what just happened, not your fault. and I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention this to anyone. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding, or at least pretending to. Of course, sir. Your business. Nathan checked his watch again. 7:52. 8 minutes to get upstairs, get somewhat presentable, and walk into a meeting that was apparently going to be a lot more interesting than he'd expected. Come on, Em, he said, guiding her toward the elevators. We're running late. Are we in trouble? No, Bug. We're fine. Then why do you look worried? Because I just got humiliated in my own building lobby, Nathan thought. Because the woman who did it is trying to buy this place out from under me. Because I'm about to walk into a meeting looking like I lost a fight with a coffee pot, and that's going to raise questions I don't feel like answering. Out loud, he said, just thinking. They reached the elevators just as a set of doors slid open. Nathan started to step inside, then stopped. The woman, Victoria Langford, was already in there, standing in the back corner with her phone pressed to her ear. She glanced up, saw Nathan and Emma, and her expression went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, annoyance, resignation. For a second, Nathan considered waiting for the next elevator. Would be easier, less awkward, wouldn't require sharing a small metal box with someone who'd just publicly questioned his fitness as a parent. But the doors were already open, and he was already late, and something stubborn in him refused to be intimidated by a woman with expensive shoes and no manners. Going up? He asked Emma. She looked at Victoria, then at Nathan, then nodded uncertainly. Okay. They stepped into the elevator. Victoria moved to the corner, angling her body away from them, still talking on her phone in a low-clipped voice. Yes, I'm on my way up now. No, there was a delay. It's handled. 8 o'clock, I know. Yes, I have the revised offer. Nathan pressed the button for 40, noticing that it was already lit. Of course it was. Victoria was going to the same floor, to the same meeting, to negotiate the purchase of a building she apparently thought she already owned. The doors slid shut. The elevator started to rise, that slight stomach drop feeling that Emma usually loved, but today just made her press closer to Nathan's leg. The floor indicator above the doors ticked up. 3, 4, 5. Climbing toward 40, while 3 people who really didn't want to be trapped together tried to pretend they were alone. Victoria's phone conversation had ended, but she kept the device in her hand, scrolling through something with intense focus. Her whole posture screamed, "Leave me alone," which was fine with Nathan. He had no desire to continue their lobby conversation, no interest in round 2 of the Let's Judge Nathan's Life Choices game. But Emma, who had inherited exactly none of her father's ability to read a room, had other ideas. What kind of coffee was it? She asked. Victoria looked up, startled. Excuse me? The coffee you spilled. What kind was it? Emma's tone was genuinely curious, no accusation in it. My daddy likes coffee, but only in the morning and only with lots of milk. He says black coffee tastes like sadness. Despite everything, Nathan felt a smile tug at his mouth. I don't think I said it exactly like that, Bug. You said it tastes like disappointment. That's basically the same thing. Victoria stared at Emma like she'd just spoken in ancient Greek. It was a latte. Vanilla. Oh, that's the fancy kind. Emma nodded sagely. We don't get those. Too expensive. Emma, Nathan said quietly. What? It's true. You said they charge like $5 for milk with foam on it. Victoria's expression did something complicated. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away, focusing very hard on the floor indicator. 12, 13, 14. The elevator climbed in silence. Nathan could feel the tension like a physical thing pressing against his skin. This was going to be the longest elevator ride of his life, and they weren't even halfway there yet. He tried to think of something to say, some way to break the ice, or at least make this less unbearable, but everything that came to mind sounded wrong. Emma, mercifully, had gone quiet, absorbed in examining the elevator's wood paneling with intense interest. She reached out and touched it gently, running her small fingers over the grain. Emma, hands to yourself, Nathan murmured. It's okay. I'm just looking. This is real wood, not the fake kind. You can tell because of the patterns. They don't repeat. Miss Patterson taught us about patterns. That's nice, Bug, but still. I'm not hurting it. 23, 24, 25. Victoria shifted her weight, the movement drawing Nathan's attention despite himself. She was still pointedly not looking at them, still radiating that leave-me-alone energy, but something about her posture had changed. She looked uncomfortable. Not physically uncomfortable, but socially, like she was trapped somewhere she didn't want to be doing something she didn't want to do. Good, Nathan thought, then immediately felt petty for thinking it. The elevator continued its climb. 30, 31, 32. Daddy? Emma whispered, loud enough that it definitely wasn't a whisper. Why are we going to the same floor as the mean coffee lady? Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Emma. What? I'm just asking. You can ask me later, but I want to know now. Later, Bug. Victoria had definitely heard. There was no way she hadn't, but she gave no sign of it. Just kept staring at her phone like it held the secrets of the universe, jaw tight, shoulders square. 38. 39. The elevator slowed, that gentle deceleration that meant they were almost there. Nathan felt his stomach tighten, not from the motion but from what was coming. The doors would open, and Victoria would step out, heading to her meeting. And Nathan would step out, heading to his meeting. And in a few minutes, in that conference room with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the obscenely expensive furniture, they would both discover something that was going to make the lobby incident look like a minor disagreement. The elevator chimed softly. 40. The doors slid open, revealing a reception area that looked like it had been decorated by someone with unlimited money and no sense of restraint. Everything was white marble and chrome, with modern art on the walls that probably cost more than Nathan's house. A receptionist sat behind a massive desk, young and polished and wearing an expression of professional boredom. Victoria stepped out first, heels clicking against the marble, already moving with purpose toward the hallway that led to the conference rooms. She didn't look back. Nathan took Emma's hand and followed, aware of the receptionist's eyes tracking them, probably wondering the same thing everyone in the lobby had wondered. What was a guy dressed like this doing on the executive floor? Mr. Carter, the receptionist said, her boredom vanishing into surprise. We weren't expecting you until... I know I'm early, Sarah. Is the conference room ready? Yes, sir, of course. Everyone's already assembled. They're just waiting for... She trailed off, looking past Nathan at Victoria, who had stopped mid-stride and turned around, confusion written across her face. Did she just call you Mr. Carter? Victoria asked. Nathan met her eyes. She did. As in, Nathan Carter? That's my name. Victoria's face went through the same rapid emotional journey it had in the elevator. Surprise, confusion, disbelief, and finally, slowly, dawning horror. You're Nathan Carter, she said again, like saying it twice would make it make sense. The Nathan Carter. Is there another one? But you're wearing... She gestured helplessly at his stained construction jacket. You look like... Like what? Nathan asked quietly. The hallway had gone silent. Sarah was staring at her computer screen, determinedly not watching this conversation. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. The ventilation system hummed. Victoria's mouth opened, closed. For the first time since they'd met, she looked genuinely rattled. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? You weren't, Nathan said. That's kind of the point. The point of what? Of dressing like this. Of not announcing who I am. Of letting people show me exactly who they are before they know who I am. He shifted the blueprints under his arm. It's very educational. Victoria stared at him, and Nathan could see her mind working, replaying the lobby scene, hearing her own words coming back to her. The judgment, the condescension, the casual cruelty dressed up as concern. Oh God, she whispered. Yeah, I wasn't. She looked genuinely lost, all that polished confidence cracking apart. Mr. Carter, I apologize. If you had known, you would have treated me differently, Nathan finished. That's exactly the problem, Ms. Langford. He walked past her, Emma's hand still in his, heading down the hallway toward the conference room. Behind him, he heard Victoria make a small sound, something between a gasp and a groan. Daddy, Emma whispered, what's happening? Something the mean coffee lady didn't expect, Bug. Is she in trouble? Nathan thought about that. Thought about Victoria's face when she realized who he was. The horror in her eyes when she understood what she'd done. Thought about the meeting waiting for them. The negotiation that was supposed to happen, the deal that would or wouldn't be made. Yeah, he said softly. I think she might be. They reached the conference room door. Through the glass panel, Nathan could see lawyers already assembled, financial advisors with their laptops open, assistants checking phones, all of them waiting for this meeting to start, having no idea that it had already gone completely off the rails. Nathan took a breath, straightened his coffee-stained jacket, and opened the door. The conference room was exactly what you'd expect from a building like Blackstone Plaza, designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline, a table that could seat 20 made from some dark wood that probably had its own endangered species protection status, leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The kind of room where billion-dollar deals got made and careers got destroyed, often in the same afternoon. Nathan had been in this room exactly 3 times in the 8 years he'd owned the building. He hated it. The conversation stopped the moment he walked in. 6 people turned to stare. 3 lawyers in matching navy suits, 2 financial advisors who looked like they'd been cloned from the same MBA program, and an older man Nathan recognized as Richard Morrison, Victoria's lead counsel. They'd been in the middle of discussing something, papers spread across the table, laptops open, but all of that froze when they saw Nathan's coffee-stained jacket and the 6-year-old girl holding his hand. Mr. Carter, Morrison said, recovering first. He was good at that, Nathan had noticed in their previous meetings. Nothing seemed to rattle him. We weren't expecting you for another few minutes. I'm early. Nathan guided Emma to one of the chairs along the wall, the ones meant for assistants or observers. Emma, you can sit here, okay? I brought your book. Emma climbed into the chair, which was too big for her, her feet dangling a good 6 inches off the floor. The animal one? The animal one. Nathan pulled a battered paperback from his jacket pocket, some kind of encyclopedia of weird animal facts that Emma had been obsessed with for the past month. Remember what we talked about? Quiet as a mouse. Emma opened the book, already absorbed. But mice aren't actually that quiet, Daddy. They make ultrasonic vocalizations that humans can't hear, but other mice can, so really the expression should be, Emma, fine, I'll be quiet. Nathan straightened, very aware of 6 pairs of eyes still watching him. He could see them trying to process it, the construction jacket, the kid, the whole situation that didn't match whatever mental picture they'd built of Blackstone Plaza's mysterious owner. Gentlemen, he said, taking a seat at the head of the table. The chair was absurdly comfortable. Ladies. He nodded to one of the financial advisors, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd introduced herself as Chen at their last meeting. Shall we get started? We're still waiting for Ms. Langford, Morrison said carefully. She called up from the lobby a few minutes ago. Should be here any moment. She's here, Nathan said. We shared an elevator. Something flickered across Morrison's face. Curiosity, maybe concern. I see. And did you two speak? You could say that. The lawyers exchanged glances. Nathan could see them trying to figure out what that meant, whether they should be worried, whether this whole deal was about to implode before it even started. He should probably put them at ease, explain that everything was fine, that a little lobby confrontation wasn't going to derail months of negotiation. But he was still wearing coffee from Victoria's spectacular lack of spatial awareness, and his daughter was still processing being told she didn't belong in this building, and Nathan was discovering that he wasn't as good at letting things go as he'd thought. The conference room door opened. Victoria walked in, and she'd pulled herself together since the hallway. The shock was gone, replaced by something harder, more controlled. She'd fixed her makeup, straightened her suit, put on what Nathan was starting to recognize as her business face. Perfectly professional, perfectly pleasant, revealing absolutely nothing. Gentlemen, she said, taking a seat across from Nathan without looking at him. I apologize for the delay. There was an incident in the lobby. What kind of incident? Morrison asked. Nothing important, just... Her eyes flicked to Nathan, then away. A misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Nathan repeated. Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. The lawyers were definitely picking up on something now, leaning forward slightly, alert for whatever was happening between Nathan and Victoria. Even Emma looked up from her book, sensing the tension. Morrison cleared his throat. Well, perhaps we should begin? I believe everyone's reviewed the latest offer. Actually, Nathan said, before we get into that, I'd like to address something. Morrison paused. Of course, Mr. Carter. Ms. Langford and I had an interaction this morning in the lobby, and I think it's relevant to this discussion. Victoria's face had gone very still. Mr. Carter, I don't think... You spilled coffee on me, Nathan continued, his voice calm, almost conversational. Which, fine. Accidents happen. People bump into each other in crowded spaces. Not a big deal. No, Victoria said quietly. It wasn't. But then you made it a big deal. You turned it into something else entirely. Nathan leaned back in his chair, watching her. You want to tell everyone what you said? Or should I? The room had gone completely silent. Even the ambient noise from the building seemed to have stopped, like the whole structure was holding its breath. Victoria's hands were flat on the table, fingers spread, perfectly still. When she spoke, her voice was controlled but strained. I made some comments that were inappropriate. I've already apologized. Have you? Nathan asked. I remember you apologizing for the coffee. Don't remember the rest of it. Mr. Carter, I assure you, you questioned whether I should be raising my daughter. The words came out harder than Nathan intended, sharp enough that Emma looked up again, worried. You suggested I needed help, programs, resources. And you did it in front of a lobby full of people because you looked at my jacket and decided you knew exactly who I was. Morrison's face had gone pale. Miss Langford, is this true? Victoria didn't answer immediately. Nathan watched her struggle with it, watched her consider lying or deflecting or spinning it into something more palatable. But to her credit, she didn't. Yes, she said finally. It's true. I made assumptions I shouldn't have made, said things I shouldn't have said. She looked directly at Nathan for the first time since sitting down. And I'm sorry, genuinely sorry, not just because I know who you are now, but because what I did was wrong regardless of who you turned out to be. It was a good apology, probably rehearsed during her walk from the elevator, but still good. The kind of apology that acknowledged fault without making excuses, that took responsibility without qualification. Nathan should probably accept it, move on, get to business, stop making this already awkward situation worse. Instead, he said, "Why did you do it?" Victoria blinked. "I'm sorry? Why did you assume those things about me? About my daughter? What did you see that made you think you had the right to judge whether I was fit to be a parent?" I wasn't... Victoria stopped, took a breath. You want the truth? That'd be nice. You looked out of place. Your clothes, your whole presentation. You didn't fit the environment. And yes, I made assumptions based on that. I saw a man in work clothes with a child in a business building at 8 in the morning, and I filled in a story that fit what I saw. She paused. It was prejudiced and wrong, and I own that. But why? Nathan pressed. What made you think that looking out of place meant I was a bad parent? That I needed help? That my daughter didn't belong here? Victoria's composure cracked slightly. I don't know. Yes, you do. Mr. Carter, I'm not sure what you want me to say. The truth, Nathan said again, not the polished version you practiced in your head. The real reason you looked at a man in a construction jacket and decided he was beneath you. The silence that followed felt like it had weight, pressing down on everyone in the room. Morrison was staring at his legal pad like it might offer an escape route. Chen was watching Victoria with something that looked like pity. The other lawyers had found various corners of the room to focus on, anywhere but the conversation happening at the table. Emma had closed her book. She was watching Victoria with that unsettling directness that kids sometimes had, like she could see right through the expensive suit and perfect makeup to whatever was underneath. Victoria's hands were trembling slightly on the table. Just a small tremor, barely visible, but Nathan saw it. Because that's what I was taught, she said quietly. Growing up, in my family, in my world, appearance mattered. How you dressed, how you spoke, where you went, who you associated with, it all mattered. And people who didn't meet those standards, who didn't present themselves correctly, they were less. They were problems to be managed or helped or avoided entirely. And you believe that? I didn't question it, Victoria said. Why would I? Everyone around me believed the same thing. My parents, my friends, my colleagues. It was just how the world worked. But you know better now, Nathan said. Right? You're 30 years old. You run a major investment firm. You've traveled. You've been educated. You know that judging people by their clothes is wrong. Of course I do. Then why did you do it? Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and Nathan saw something crack behind her eyes. Because knowing something intellectually and actually believing it are different things. Because 30 years of conditioning doesn't disappear just because you logically understand it's wrong. Because when I saw you in that lobby, every instinct I've been trained to have kicked in automatically, and I reacted before I thought. It was the most honest thing she'd said since sitting down. Maybe the most honest thing she'd said all morning. Nathan could see the effort it cost her, the way her shoulders had tensed, her breathing had changed. Okay, he said. Victoria blinked. Okay? That's an answer I can work with. Nathan glanced at Morrison, who looked like he wasn't sure whether to be relieved or more worried. Shall we talk about the building now? The shift was so abrupt that it took everyone a moment to catch up. Morrison fumbled with his papers, nearly knocking over a water glass. Chen pulled her laptop closer, fingers already moving across the keyboard. The other lawyers seemed to exhale collectively, grateful to be back on familiar ground. But Victoria was still staring at Nathan. That's it? We're just moving on? Did you want to keep talking about your childhood conditioning? No, but I thought... She stopped, recalibrated. I thought you'd want to cancel the meeting after what happened. Why would I do that? Because I insulted you. Because I questioned your ability to parent your child. Because I was... She gestured helplessly. Because I was horrible. You were, Nathan agreed. But canceling the meeting doesn't accomplish anything except making me feel righteous and leaving you feeling guilty. Neither of those things helps anyone. Emma had opened her book again, but Nathan could tell she was still listening. Kids were like that. They pretended not to pay attention while catching every word. Morrison cleared his throat, clearly eager to redirect. Mr. Carter, we've reviewed your concerns about the previous offer. The tenant displacement clauses, the preservation agreements for the building's historical features, the commitments regarding current employees. We've drafted new language that we believe addresses most of your objections. Most? Nathan asked. There are a few points where we're still far apart. The timeline for renovation work, for instance. Ms. Langford's team wants to begin immediately after closing, but your proposed delays would push the start date back by nearly 6 months. Nathan leaned forward, scanning the documents Morrison was distributing. The delays aren't arbitrary. You want to gut the ground floor retail spaces and convert them to high-end commercial units. That means displacing 12 small businesses that have been there for years. 6 months gives them time to relocate properly, find new spaces, not lose their customer base. We've offered very generous relocation packages, Victoria said, her business voice fully back now, confident and controlled. Every tenant would receive compensation well above market rate. Money doesn't replace community, Nathan countered. The coffee shop on the corner, the bookstore, that little Vietnamese restaurant by the south entrance. They're not just businesses, they're neighborhood fixtures. People rely on them. And they can rely on them in new locations, Victoria said. Mr. Carter, I understand the sentimental attachment, but this is a business transaction. We're talking about maximizing the building's value, bringing it into the modern market, by erasing everything that makes it part of the neighborhood, by upgrading it to match its potential. They stared at each other across the table, and Nathan was reminded of the elevator, that same tension crackling between them. But this was different. This wasn't about coffee or prejudice or hurt feelings. This was about what Blackstone Plaza would become after Nathan sold it, about whether it would remain a building that served its community or transform into just another sterile monument to wealth. Mr. Carter, Morrison said carefully, perhaps we could discuss a compromise, a phased approach to the renovations, allowing some tenants to relocate on the original timeline, while others— No, Nathan's voice was flat. 6 months minimum. All tenants, no exceptions. That's not negotiable. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Everything is negotiable. Not this. You're being unreasonable. I'm being fair to people who can't afford lawyers like Morrison to protect their interests. You're being sentimental, Victoria shot back. These businesses, they're not your responsibility anymore. Once you sell the building, what happens to them is no longer your concern. That's exactly the kind of thinking that made you spill coffee on someone and then blame them for being in your way. The words landed like a slap. Victoria's face flushed, and the lawyers around the table suddenly found their documents fascinating. "That's not fair," Victoria said, her voice tight. "Isn't it?" Nathan asked. "You keep talking about value and potential and maximizing returns, but you know what I heard in the lobby? The same thing. I wasn't valuable enough to deserve basic courtesy. My daughter wasn't worth considering as an actual person. We were just obstacles in your way, problems to be managed." I wasn't. Victoria stopped, her composure cracking again. "You're conflating two completely different situations." "Am I?" Emma closed her book with a soft thump. "Daddy, can I ask a question?" Every head in the room turned toward her. Nathan smiled despite the tension. "Sure, Bug." "Why is everyone arguing about the restaurants? Don't they just need more time to move?" Out of the mouths of children, Nathan thought. "That's exactly right, Emma, but Ms. Langford doesn't want to wait." Emma looked at Victoria with that same unnerving directness from before. "Why not?" Victoria seemed genuinely caught off guard by being addressed directly. Because the construction timeline is already very tight, and any delays would cost a significant amount of money." "How much money?" "Emma," Nathan said gently, "I'm just asking, how much?" Victoria glanced at Morrison, who shrugged helplessly. "Several $1,000,000, probably." Emma's eyes went wide. "Wow, that's I don't even know how much that is." "It's a lot," Victoria said. "But you have a lot of money, right?" Emma's tone was purely curious, no judgment in it. "My daddy says you're trying to buy this whole building, and buildings cost billions of dollars. So if you have billions, what's a few million?" The room had gone very quiet again. Nathan tried not to smile. He should probably intervene, save Victoria from being cross-examined by a first grader. But there was something fascinating about watching it happen. Victoria was staring at Emma like she was a puzzle that needed solving. "It's not about whether I can afford it. It's about whether the expense is justified." "But the restaurants need time," Emma said. "That's what Daddy said. So isn't that justification?" "Emma, that's enough," Nathan said, though his heart wasn't really in it. "I know, Bug, but the adults need to talk about this." Emma sighed dramatically and reopened her book. "Fine, but I still think 6 months isn't that long to wait if it helps people." Morrison coughed into his hand, possibly covering a laugh. Chen was definitely smiling. Even the clone lawyers looked amused. Victoria's face had gone through several colors in rapid succession. She looked at Emma, then at Nathan, then at the document spread across the table. "Out of the mouths of babes," she murmured. "Sorry?" "Nothing. Victoria took a breath. "Your daughter makes a valid point. 6 months is not, objectively, an unreasonable timeline, and the cost, while significant, is not insurmountable." She looked directly at Nathan. "I'll agree to the delay. Full 6 months, all tenants." Nathan hadn't expected that. He'd been prepared for more argument, more back and forth, maybe even for the deal to fall apart entirely. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Victoria's smile was thin. "Consider it penance for the lobby." "I don't want penance. I want good faith negotiation." "Then consider it good faith negotiation informed by a very astute 6-year-old. Emma looked up, beaming. "I'm astute." "You are," Victoria agreed, and for the first time since they'd met, her expression softened into something almost genuine. "You're also right, which is rare at any age." Nathan watched this exchange, trying to reconcile the woman who'd humiliated him in the lobby with the one currently complimenting his daughter. They weren't different people exactly, just different versions of the same person, one filtered through assumption and prejudice, the other forced to actually engage with what was in front of her. Morrison was already making notes, relief evident on his face. "Excellent. So we'll draft language specifying the 6-month delay and the support provisions for relocating tenants. What about the historical preservation clauses?" "Mr. Carter, you've requested that all original architectural features remain intact. The marble in the lobby, the brass elevator doors, the Art Deco detailing on the facade. Non-negotiable," Nathan said. "Ms. Langford's team has expressed concerns about the cost of maintaining those features versus modernizing." "The features stay," Nathan said firmly. "That's why the building's called Blackstone Plaza and not generic Tower Number 7. The architecture matters. Victoria was studying him again, that calculating look back in her eyes. You really love this building. I built it, Nathan said. Well, I didn't build it. My grandfather built it, 1929, right before the crash. He was an architect and a stubborn idiot who thought Chicago needed more Art Deco when the whole world was about to fall apart. I didn't know that, Victoria said quietly. Why would you? It's not in any of the sales materials. Nathan ran his hand over the table's surface, feeling the grain of the wood. My grandfather died before I was born, but my dad worked in this building his whole life. Started as a maintenance guy, worked his way up to building manager. When the previous owners wanted to demolish it in the 90s, he convinced them to sell instead. Took out every loan he could find, mortgaged everything we had, bought it for pennies on the dollar because nobody wanted a 90-year-old building that needed millions in repairs. And you inherited it? Morrison asked. Eventually. Dad passed 8 years ago. Heart attack right there in the lobby. Nathan pointed vaguely toward the floor below them. Emma was still a baby. He never got to know her. The conference room had transformed into something else entirely. Not a negotiation space anymore, but a confessional. Nathan wasn't sure why he was sharing this, why it felt important for these strangers to understand the building's history. His history. Maybe because Victoria had been honest about her conditioning, her automatic prejudice. Maybe turnabout was fair play. The point is, Nathan continued, this building isn't just an asset to me. It's family history. My grandfather's dream, my father's life's work. And yeah, I know that sounds sentimental. I know it's not rational business thinking, but I don't care. If I'm selling it, it's going to be to someone who understands that buildings are more than just square footage and rental income. Victoria was very quiet. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer, less controlled. My father would say that's exactly the kind of thinking that prevents wealth accumulation. That emotional attachment to assets is a weakness to be overcome. What would you say? She smiled, but it was sad. I'd say I was raised by my father. Nathan understood what she meant. The same conditioning that made her judge people by their appearance applied to buildings and businesses and everything else. Reduce it all to numbers, strip away the sentiment, maximize the return. It was probably how she'd become a billionaire at 30. It was definitely how she'd ended up in that lobby, spilling coffee and assumptions all over a stranger. Ms. Langford, Nathan said, I'm going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. All right. Why do you want this building? And I don't mean the business case. I've read your proposal. I understand the ROI projections and the market positioning. I mean, why you, personally? What made you decide that Blackstone Plaza was worth over a year of negotiation? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming softly against the table. The lawyers had given up even pretending to work, all of them watching this conversation unfold. Because it reminded me of my grandfather's building, she said finally. He built the Langford Tower in Manhattan. 1931, Art Deco, very similar to this. I spent summers there as a kid, running through the halls, pretending I owned the whole city. My grandfather would take me to the observation deck on the top floor and point out all the buildings he knew, tell me their stories. Not the financial stories, the human ones. Who built them? Why? What they meant to the city. What happened to it? Nathan asked, though he suspected he knew. My father sold it when I was 12. Got an exceptional price, turned it into a luxury condo development. Very profitable. Victoria's smile was bitter. I cried for a week. He told me I needed to grow up, that buildings were just investments, that I was being childish. And you believed him. I learned to believe him. There's a difference. She looked at Nathan. When I saw Blackstone Plaza for the first time, I thought, I don't know. Maybe I could do it right this time. Keep the history, preserve what mattered, prove that you could honor a building's past while securing its future. But the renovations you're proposing would destroy half of what makes this building special, Nathan pointed out. I know. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. I know. Emma had put her book down again, listening with rapt attention. Nathan could see her trying to process this conversation, trying to understand why the mean coffee lady was suddenly talking about grandfathers and crying over buildings. Morrison cleared his throat delicately. Perhaps we should take a break? Reconvene in 20 minutes with fresh perspectives. Nathan was about to agree when Emma spoke up. Can I ask Ms. Langford something? Everyone looked at her. Victoria nodded slowly. Of course. If you loved your grandfather's building so much, why would you do the same thing to this one that your daddy did to that one? The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the conference table. Victoria's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, recognition, shame. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. That's a very perceptive question. Emma's good at those, Nathan said quietly. I don't know, Victoria admitted. I honestly don't know. I told myself it was different, that I was preserving the important parts, that modernization was necessary. But you're right. I'm doing exactly what my father did, just with better marketing. The honesty was startling. Nathan had expected defensiveness, rationalization, maybe anger at being questioned by a child. Instead, Victoria looked like someone who'd just been shown their reflection and didn't like what they saw. Mr. Carter, she said, I think I need to reconsider my entire approach to this acquisition. Morrison sat up straighter. Miss Langford, perhaps we should discuss this privately before— No. Victoria's voice was firm. Mr. Carter asked me why I wanted this building, and I gave him half an answer. The truth is, I wanted it because it reminded me of something I lost, something my father taught me not to value, and I was about to do the exact same thing to it that he did to the Langford Tower. You were preserving the facade, one of the clone lawyers offered weakly. The Art Deco elements were part of the proposal. Preserving the facade isn't preserving the building, Victoria said. It's taxidermy. You stuff it and mount it and call it conservation, but you've killed what made it alive. She looked at Nathan. I want to change the proposal, significantly. Keep all the architectural features, honor the 6-month timeline, maintain the community spaces. I want to buy this building and actually preserve it, not just its skin. Nathan studied her, trying to figure out if this was genuine or just another negotiating tactic. But Victoria's face showed no calculation, no strategic maneuvering. She looked tired and honest and maybe a little lost. That's going to cost you, he said. I know. Millions more than your current offer. Maybe tens of millions, depending on how extensive the true preservation is. I know. Your investors are going to hate it. The ROI timeline extends significantly. The profit margins shrink. I know all of that, Mr. Carter. Victoria's voice was steady now, certain. And I don't care. Or maybe I'm finally starting to care about the right things. Either way, I want to do this properly. Morrison looked like he might have a stroke. Ms. Langford, with all due respect, this is a highly emotional decision that you're making in a very charged moment. Perhaps we should table this discussion until you've had time to— Richard? Victoria's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. I appreciate your counsel, but my decision stands. Draft a new proposal incorporating Mr. Carter's preservation requirements. All of them. That will take weeks, maybe months. Then it takes months. Victoria stood, gathering her papers with sharp, decisive movements. Mr. Carter, I apologize, but I need to reconvene with my team privately. We clearly have significant work to do before we can present you with a proposal that actually respects what this building represents. Nathan stood as well, surprised and slightly suspicious. You're calling off the meeting? I'm postponing it until I can come back with something worthy of your grandfather's building and your father's life's work. She paused at the door. And I apologize again. For the lobby, for my assumptions, for everything. I know that doesn't fix what I said or how I made you and your daughter feel, but I want you to know that I heard you, both of you. She left, Morrison and the lawyers scrambling to follow, their papers and laptops hastily gathered. In 30 seconds, the conference room was empty except for Nathan, Emma, and Chen, who was still sitting at the table with an expression of bemused shock. Well, Chen said after a moment, that was unexpected. Which part? Nathan asked. All of it, but especially the part where she completely dismantled her own proposal. Chen closed her laptop. Mr. Carter, I've been in acquisition negotiations for 15 years. I've never seen anything like that. You think it's genuine? I think it's either genuine or the most elaborate manipulation I've ever witnessed. Chen stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. But my read? She meant it. That woman just realized something about herself she didn't like, and she's going to burn a lot of money trying to fix it. After Chen left, Nathan sank back into his chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the confrontation was wearing off, leaving him tired and coffee-stained and wondering what the hell had just happened. "Daddy?" Emma climbed out of her chair and came over to him. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, Bug. Just processing." "Is Ms. Langford going to be nicer now?" Nathan pulled Emma into his lap, breathing in the smell of her shampoo and breakfast cereal. "I don't know. Maybe. People don't usually change that fast. But she said she would. Saying and doing are different things." "I know, but I think she meant it." Emma snuggled against Nathan's chest. She looked sad when she talked about her grandfather's building, like how you look sad sometimes when you talk about Grandpa. Nathan kissed the top of her head, throat suddenly tight. "You're too smart for your own good. You know that?" "That's what Miss Patterson says." They sat there for a while, father and daughter in an empty conference room 40 stories above Chicago, while the snow continued to fall outside and the city went about its business below. Eventually, Nathan would have to clean up, deal with the coffee stain, figure out what came next with Victoria Langford and Blackstone Plaza, and this whole complicated mess. But for now, he just held his daughter and watched the snow, and tried not to think about what it meant that a woman who judged him so harshly an hour ago had just walked away from a billion-dollar deal because a 6-year-old asked her a question she couldn't answer. Nathan didn't hear from Victoria for 3 weeks. Not a call, not an email, not even a message through Morrison. It was like she'd walked out of that conference room and vanished into whatever rarefied atmosphere billionaire CEOs inhabited when they weren't buying buildings or humiliating people in lobbies. He told himself he didn't care. Told himself the deal would happen or it wouldn't, and either way, his life would continue. He had Emma to raise, a building to manage, contractors who needed decisions about the heating system on floors 12 through 15. Victoria Langford and her crisis of conscience weren't his problem. Except he kept thinking about her face when Emma asked that question. The way something had broken open behind her eyes. Like a wall cracking under pressure it was never designed to handle. "You're doing it again," Emma said from across the kitchen table. Nathan looked up from his coffee, black, disappointing, exactly the way he liked it. "Doing what?" "That thing where you stare at nothing and your eyebrows do the worry scrunch." "My eyebrows don't scrunch," Emma demonstrated, furrowing her brow into an exaggerated frown. "Like this. You've been doing it a lot since we went to the fancy building." It was Saturday morning, almost 3 weeks to the day since the meeting. Snow was still falling outside their kitchen window, the same relentless Chicago winter that never seemed to end. Emma was working on a drawing, some elaborate scene involving what appeared to be dinosaurs having a tea party. "I'm just thinking about work stuff," Nathan said. "About Ms. Langford?" "Why would you think that?" "Because every time you do the eyebrow thing, you look like you did in that big room, when she was talking about her grandpa's building." Emma added another dinosaur to her drawing, this one wearing what looked like a top hat. "Do you think she's okay?" Nathan considered lying, giving some adult answer about how Ms. Langford was fine. She was busy. Important people had important things to do. But Emma had a radar for dishonesty that rivaled most polygraph machines. "I don't know, Bug. I haven't talked to her." "Maybe you should." "Why would I do that?" Emma looked up from her drawing, giving him that look that was too old for her face. "Because she was sad. And you're sad. And maybe talking would help." "I'm not sad." "Daddy." "I'm not. I'm just—" Nathan trailed off, not sure how to explain the complicated knot of emotions he'd been carrying since that morning. Anger at how Victoria had treated them, yes, but also something else, something harder to name. Curiosity, maybe. Or concern. Or the uncomfortable recognition that he'd seen something real in that conference room, something Victoria had probably never meant to show anyone. His phone buzzed on the table between them. Nathan glanced at it, expecting another message from the HVAC contractor, or maybe Emma's school. Instead, he saw Morrison's name on the screen. The message was brief. "Ms. Langford would like to schedule a meeting. Monday at 2 p.m. if you're available. Same conference room." Nathan stared at the message for long enough that Emma noticed. "What is it?" "Ms. Langford wants to meet." "See? I told you." Emma went back to her drawing, adding what might have been a teacup to one dinosaur's claws. "You should go." "I don't remember asking for your opinion, Bug." You don't have to ask. I give it for free. Nathan typed out a response. Monday at 2 works, and tried not to think too hard about why his heart was beating faster than it should be for a simple business meeting. Monday came wrapped in the same gray cold that had defined the entire month. Nathan dropped Emma at school, endured her very pointed reminder to be nice to Ms. Langford because she's trying, and made his way downtown with a sense of dread he couldn't quite shake. This time he wore a suit. Not because he was trying to fit in or meet anyone's standards, but because showing up in the construction jacket felt like making a point he'd already made. Besides, the coffee stain had never quite come out. The lobby of Blackstone Plaza was quieter than it had been that first morning. Fewer people rushing through, more space to breathe. Nathan nodded to Marcus at the security desk, who gave him a knowing smile that suggested word had gotten around about what happened 3 weeks ago. The elevator ride to 40 felt longer alone. Nathan watched the numbers tick up, trying to organize his thoughts into something coherent. What did Victoria want to say? Had she actually redone the entire proposal, or was this meeting just damage control, a polished apology before she walked away from the deal entirely? Sarah looked up when he entered the reception area, her professional smile firmly in place. Mr. Carter, good afternoon. Miss Langford is already in the conference room. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm good, thanks. Nathan hesitated. Is she... How does she seem? Sarah's smile flickered, becoming something more genuine. Honestly, I'm not sure. She's been here since noon, going over documents. Barely spoke to anyone. She lowered her voice. Between you and me, sir, I've never seen her like this. Usually she's all confidence and control, but today she seems almost nervous. Nervous. Nathan tried to picture Victoria Langford nervous and couldn't quite manage it. The woman who dressed him down in front of a lobby full of people didn't seem like someone who got nervous about business meetings. The conference room door was closed. Nathan took a breath, straightened his tie. When had he started caring about his tie? And knocked. Come in, come. Victoria was standing at the windows looking out over the city. She'd traded the charcoal suit for something navy, her hair down instead of pulled back, the overall effect somehow less severe. The conference table was covered in documents, blueprints, what looked like architectural renderings spread across every available surface. She turned when Nathan entered, and he saw Sarah had been right. Victoria looked nervous. Not obviously. Her posture was still straight, her expression still controlled, but there was something uncertain in her eyes, a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. She gestured to the papers on the table. I know I said I needed to rework the proposal, but I didn't expect it to take this long. Turns out fundamentally changing your approach to a billion-dollar acquisition is more complicated than I anticipated. Nathan moved closer to the table, scanning the documents. What am I looking at? A complete renovation of Langford Capital's acquisition strategy for Blackstone Plaza. Victoria picked up one of the renderings, holding it carefully like it might disintegrate. I brought in a preservation architect, Dr. Helen Park from the Historic Buildings Conservancy. She spent the last 2 weeks cataloging every original feature in this building, from the obvious things like the lobby marble to details I didn't even know existed. Art Deco light fixtures in the basement, hand-painted ceiling medallions in some of the executive offices, even original bathroom tiles from 1929. I know about most of those, Nathan said. My dad kept meticulous records. I'm sure he did. But Dr. Park found things even your father might have missed. There's a whole layer of history in this building that's been covered up or forgotten. Victoria set down the rendering, picking up another document. This is the new proposal. Full preservation of all historical elements, extended timeline for tenant relocation, community space requirements maintained, even expanded. The Vietnamese restaurant you mentioned? We're guaranteeing their lease for the next 20 years at below market rates. Nathan took the document, scanning the bullet points. It was everything he'd asked for and more. The kind of proposal that would make preservationists weep with joy and investors weep for entirely different reasons. This is going to cost you a fortune, he said. Approximately $73 million more than the original offer, according to our financial team. Plus extended timeline costs, reduced rental income from the community spaces, ongoing maintenance expenses for historical features. Victoria's smile was tight. Morrison nearly quit when I showed him the numbers. But he didn't. No. He's too curious about whether I've actually lost my mind or if there's some brilliant strategy he's not seeing. She paused. There isn't, by the way. A brilliant strategy. This is just me trying to do the right thing for once. Nathan set the document down, studying Victoria's face. She looked tired, he realized. Not physically exhausted, but worn down by something heavier than sleep deprivation. Why? He asked. Why what? Why go to all this trouble? You could have walked away from the deal entirely, found another building, another investment. Why spend 3 weeks and $73 million fixing a proposal that was already dead in the water? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting back to the windows. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what your daughter said, about me doing to this building what my father did to my grandfathers. And she was right. I was so focused on making the deal work financially that I forgot to ask whether it should work that way at all. That's very philosophical for someone in your line of work. It is. Victoria turned back to face him. Do you want to know what happened after I left that meeting? Nathan wasn't sure he did, but he nodded anyway. I went back to my office, Victoria said, and I called my father. First time in about 6 months. We're not close. I asked him about the Langford Tower, about why he sold it, whether he ever regretted it. Do you know what he said? I'm guessing nothing good. He said regret is for people who can't afford their decisions, that buildings are just containers for profit, and anyone who thinks otherwise is too sentimental to succeed in business. Victoria's laugh was hollow. Then he asked if I was having some kind of breakdown, because I sounded emotional. Sounds like a great guy. He's successful. By every measurable standard, he's successful. Built an empire, made billions, earned respect from everyone who matters in our world. Victoria moved to the table, running her fingers along the edge of one of the blueprints. And he's miserable. I've known it my whole life, but I never let myself actually see it. He has money and power and influence. And he's absolutely miserable because he trained himself not to care about anything except the next deal, the next acquisition, the next number on a balance sheet. Nathan thought about his own father, remembered him coming home late covered in building dust, exhausted from fixing some plumbing disaster on the 3rd floor or negotiating with a difficult tenant. He'd never had billions or empires or influence, but he'd loved his work, loved this building, loved the community it served, and he'd been happy in a way that had nothing to do with money. Your father sounds like someone who made choices he can't unmake, Nathan said carefully. He is, and I've spent my entire adult life making the exact same choices, following the exact same path, telling myself it was different because I was doing it better, or smarter, or more efficiently. But it's not different. I'm just younger. Victoria looked directly at Nathan, and there was something raw in her expression, something unguarded. That morning in the lobby, when I looked at you and your daughter, I saw everything my father taught me to dismiss. Someone who didn't dress right, didn't fit the environment, didn't meet the standards. And I reacted exactly like he would have reacted, exactly like he taught me to react. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out if I can unlearn 30 years of conditioning before I turn into him completely. She gestured at the papers on the table. This proposal, this whole new approach, it's me trying to prove that I can do business differently, that I can value something beyond profit margins and ROI. Nathan picked up one of the architectural renderings, a beautiful drawing of the lobby with all its original features restored and highlighted. This is good work. Dr. Park knows what she's doing. She's brilliant, also completely horrified by what my original proposal would have done to the building. Victoria moved to stand beside him, looking down at the same rendering. She spent 40 minutes explaining the historical significance of the brass elevator doors before I had to stop her because I had another meeting. Did you know they were cast by the same company that did the doors for the Chrysler building? I did, actually. My dad had the original invoices framed in his office. Of course he did. Victoria's smile was genuine this time, small but real. I'm starting to understand why you were so protective of this place. It's not just a building to you. No, it's not. They stood there in silence, both looking at the rendering, the snow falling steadily outside the windows behind them. Nathan was acutely aware of Victoria standing close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that probably cost more than his suit. I owe you an apology, Victoria said suddenly. A real one. Not the half-hearted thing I gave you in front of the lawyers. You already apologized. I apologize for being wrong. I didn't apologize for what being wrong cost you and your daughter. She turned to face him fully. I humiliated you in front of a room full of people. I questioned your ability to parent your own child. I made assumptions about your life, your circumstances, your worth as a person based on nothing but appearance. And then I doubled down when you called me on it, because admitting I was wrong felt worse than continuing to be awful. Victoria, please let me finish. She took a breath. Your daughter was watching all of that. She saw a stranger treat her father like garbage, and she had to process that, had to figure out why an adult would be so cruel for no reason. That's not something I can take back or fix. It's damage I caused, and I need you to know that I understand that. I understand what I did. Nathan had spent 3 weeks being angry about that morning, replaying the lobby scene in his head, imagining all the things he should have said or done differently. But standing here now, listening to Victoria's voice crack slightly on the word damage, he found the anger harder to hold on to. Emma's okay, he said. She's tougher than she looks. That doesn't make what I did acceptable. No, it doesn't, but it makes it survivable. Nathan set down the rendering. You want to know what she said about you after you left the meeting? Victoria looked almost afraid of the answer. What? She said you looked sad when you talked about your grandfather's building. Said you reminded her of me when I talk about my dad. Nathan smiled slightly. Then she told me I should be nice to you because you were trying. She said that? She's 6. She forgives faster than I do. Victoria's eyes were bright, and Nathan realized with surprise that she might actually cry. She didn't. Some iron control kept the tears from falling, but they were there, just barely held back. I don't deserve that, Victoria said quietly. Probably not. But Emma doesn't operate on desert. She operates on what she sees right in front of her. Nathan gestured at the documents covering the table. And what I see right in front of me is someone who spent 3 weeks and $73 million trying to make things right. That counts for something. Does it count for enough? For you to consider this proposal? Nathan picked up the document again, reading through it more carefully this time. The preservation requirements, the tenant protections, the community commitments, it was all there, detailed and specific and legally binding. This wasn't a gesture. This was a complete restructuring of the deal, the kind that would survive Victoria's good intentions and remain enforceable long after everyone in this room had moved on to other things. I need to review this with my team, he said. Have my lawyers look at the language, make sure the protections are as strong as they appear. Of course, take as much time as you need. But Victoria? Nathan waited until she looked at him. This is good, really good. If the details hold up, this is exactly the kind of deal I'd hoped for when I first considered selling. The relief on Victoria's face was almost painful to witness. Really? Really? You did the work. You listened to what mattered, and you found a way to make it happen without destroying what made it worth saving. He paused. Your father's wrong, by the way, about regret being for people who can't afford their decisions. Regret is what keeps us from making the same mistakes twice. It's what makes us better. I'll be sure to tell him that next time he calls. Will there be a next time? Victoria considered this. I don't know. Maybe. He's still my father, even if I don't want to become him. She started gathering the papers on the table, organizing them into neat stacks. I've been thinking about what else needs to change, not just with this deal, but with how I do business generally. The whole culture at Langford Capital, the way we evaluate acquisitions, the metrics we use to measure success. That's ambitious. It's overdue. I've built a company that operates exactly like my father's, just with better technology and younger employees. Same ruthless efficiency, same disregard for anything that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Victoria handed Nathan a folder containing what looked like summary documents. I want to change that. I want to build something that actually values the communities we operate in, the people affected by our decisions. I want to prove that you can be successful without being soulless. Nathan took the folder, struck by how different she seemed from the woman in the lobby 3 weeks ago. That Victoria had been all sharp edges and cold certainty. This one was uncertain, questioning, searching for something she couldn't quite name. That's going to be hard, he said, changing a company culture. Going against everything you were taught. I know, but I have to try. Because the alternative is turning into my father, and I'd rather fail trying to be better than succeed at being him. They stood there for a moment, the conference room quiet around them, the city spread out below like a model waiting to be assembled. Nathan realized he was holding the folder without having looked at it, too focused on Victoria's face, on the genuine uncertainty and hope he saw there. "Mr. Carter?" Sarah's voice came through the intercom. "I have Dr. Park on line 2. She said you'd asked for a call about the preservation assessment." Victoria moved to the phone. "Would you mind if she joined us? She can explain the historical elements better than I can." "Sure." Victoria pressed a button, and a woman's voice filled the room, precise, enthusiastic, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd spent their entire life studying things most people walked past without noticing. "Ms. Langford." "Hello. Is Mr. Carter with you?" "I'm here, Dr. Park," Nathan said. "Wonderful. I've been hoping to speak with you. Your father's documentation of this building is extraordinary. The level of detail, the photographs, the preservation of original materials, it's a historian's dream." She paused. "I actually wanted to ask your permission to use some of his records in a paper I'm writing about Art Deco preservation in Chicago." "Of course. He'd be honored." "Excellent. Now, Ms. Langford said you might have questions about the assessment." Nathan looked at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm curious about the scope of the restoration work. Some of these features have been painted over or modified over the years. How much of the original detail can actually be recovered?" Dr. Park launched into an explanation that was simultaneously technical and passionate, describing the layers of paint concealing hand-carved wood details, the drop ceilings hiding original plasterwork, the modernizations that could be carefully reversed to reveal what lay beneath. She spoke about the building the way Nathan's father had spoken about it, with love and respect and deep knowledge. Victoria watched Nathan's face as he listened, saw something in his expression shift and soften. This was what the building meant to him, what he was protecting. Not just the physical structure, but the history it contained, the craftsmanship it represented, the connection to his family that lived in every preserved detail. "There's one more thing," Dr. Park said. "Something I found in the basement, in a storage room that I don't think has been opened in decades." "What kind of thing?" Nathan asked. "Original architectural drawings, not blueprints, but artistic renderings. The kind architects used to do by hand before everything went digital. They're signed by Arthur Carter, dated 1928. Your grandfather's work, Mr. Carter. The original vision for this building before a single brick was laid." Nathan felt something catch in his throat. "I didn't know those still existed. My dad always said they were lost. They were buried, but they're not lost anymore." Dr. Park's voice was gentle. "I've taken the liberty of having them professionally preserved and framed. They're quite beautiful. Your grandfather had real talent." "Thank you," Nathan managed, "for finding them, for taking care of them. It's my job, and my pleasure. Buildings like this, they deserve to be understood and protected." She paused. "I'll send over the full restoration plan by end of day. But Mr. Carter, whatever you decide about this sale, please know that this building is significant. Not just to you, but to Chicago's architectural history. What you and your father preserved here matters." After the call ended, Nathan stood very still, processing. His grandfather's drawings, thought lost for nearly a century, found and preserved and waiting for him. It felt like a sign, though he wasn't sure of what. "Are you all right?" Victoria asked quietly. "Yeah, just... that was unexpected." "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" "Good. Definitely good." Nathan looked at her. "You didn't have to do that. Hire Dr. Park, search the building, preserve those drawings." "I wanted to. I wanted to understand what I was trying to buy, really understand it. Not just the square footage and the rental income, but what it meant." Victoria moved closer. "Your family built something that lasted almost 100 years. That's rare. That's worth honoring. Even if it cost you $73 million. Even then." They stood facing each other, and Nathan realized that something had shifted between them. The anger from the lobby was gone, replaced by something more complicated. Not quite trust, not quite friendship, but maybe the foundation for both. "I should go," Nathan said, though he didn't move. "Review these documents. Talk to my team." "Of course." Victoria didn't move either. "When do you think you'll have an answer?" I don't mean to pressure you, but my board is getting nervous about the extended timeline. Give me 2 weeks. I'll give you a decision by the end of the month. That works? Victoria extended her hand, a formal gesture that felt strange after everything they'd shared. Thank you for hearing me out, for giving me a chance to do this right. Nathan took her hand, felt the firm grip, the slight tremor he suspected she was trying to hide. Thank you for actually doing the work, for not just making promises but backing them up with action. He left the conference room with the folder under his arm, his mind already spinning through everything he needed to do. Call his lawyers, review the preservation plans, think through the implications of selling the building his grandfather built and his father saved. But underneath all of that, underneath the practical considerations and business calculations, was something else. The memory of Victoria's face when she talked about trying not to become her father. The genuine remorse in her voice when she apologized. The way she'd spent 3 weeks trying to fix a mistake most people would have just written off as the cost of doing business. Emma had been right. Victoria was trying. And maybe that counted for more than Nathan had wanted to admit. Sarah caught him on his way to the elevator. Mr. Carter, Ms. Langford asked me to give you this. She handed him a small envelope, thick paper with his name written on the front in precise handwriting. Nathan waited until he was in the elevator to open it. Inside was a note, brief and handwritten. Mr. Carter, thank you for not giving up on me after the lobby. Thank you for showing me that how we treat people matters more than how we dress, or where we work, or how much money we have. And thank you for letting me try to be better. I know I have a long way to go, but your daughter was right. I'm trying. VL. Nathan folded the note carefully and put it in his pocket, watching the floor numbers count down as the elevator descended. When the doors opened on the lobby, he saw Marcus at the security desk and walked over. Mr. Carter, good afternoon. Everything go all right upstairs? Yeah, Marcus. Everything went fine. Nathan paused. You remember that morning 3 weeks ago, the coffee incident? Marcus's expression became carefully neutral. I remember. You think people can change? Really change, not just pretend to? Marcus considered this, his kind eyes studying Nathan's face. I think people can change if they have a good enough reason. Question is whether they do or not. Most folks, they don't have a reason strong enough to do the hard work. But some do. Some do. And when they do, when they really commit to it, it's something to see. Marcus smiled. Why? You thinking about giving Ms. Langford another chance? Maybe. Still deciding. Well, sir, for what it's worth, she's been different these past few weeks. Politer to the staff, more aware of the people around her. Small things, but noticeable. He lowered his voice. Could be an act. Could be real. Time will tell. Nathan nodded, filing that away with everything else he was processing. Thanks, Marcus. Anytime, sir. The lobby was emptying out as afternoon faded toward evening. People heading home to families and dinners and lives that had nothing to do with billion-dollar deals or architectural preservation or trying to become better than your parents taught you to be. Nathan stepped out into the cold, the folder tucked safely under his arm, Victoria's note in his pocket, and his grandfather's recovered drawings waiting somewhere in the building behind him. 2 weeks to make a decision that would change everything. 2 weeks to figure out if Victoria Langford was really trying to be different or just trying to close a deal. 2 weeks to decide whether giving people second chances was wisdom or just another way of getting hurt. Nathan pulled out his phone and called Emma's school. Hey, it's Nathan Carter. I'm going to be a few minutes late picking up Emma. Can you let her know I'm on my way? Then he turned back toward the building, toward the basement where his grandfather's drawings waited, toward the history that had shaped him and the future he was trying to build. Some decisions couldn't be made in conference rooms or calculated on spreadsheets. Some decisions required going back to the beginning, understanding what mattered and why before you could figure out where to go next. And Nathan had a feeling this was one of those decisions. The basement of Blackstone Plaza smelled like old paper and decades of accumulated dust. Nathan hadn't been down here in years, not since he'd helped his father inventory storage rooms when he was still in high school. Back then it had seemed like a catacomb, endless hallways lined with forgotten furniture and boxes of records nobody would ever look at again. Now, following the building manager through the fluorescent-lit corridors, Nathan felt like he was walking through his own history. It's this one, Tom said, stopping at a door marked Storage 7B. He was in his late 50s, had worked at Blackstone since before Nathan's father died. Dr. Park had us move everything to the climate-controlled section after she found it. Didn't want the drawings getting any more damaged than they already were. The room was small, lined with metal shelving units holding archive boxes. But in the center, laid out on a work table under protective plastic, were his grandfather's drawings. Nathan approached slowly, almost afraid to look. Tom hung back by the door, giving him space. The drawings were beautiful. Not in a polished, professional way, but in the way all genuine passion projects were beautiful. Full of detail and care and a vision of something that didn't exist yet but might, if the right people believed in it hard enough. His grandfather had drawn the building from every angle, exterior and interior, the lobby and the elevators, and even individual office spaces. Each one was signed in the corner, Arthur J. Carter, architect, 1928. Your dad would have loved this, Tom said quietly. He spent years looking for these, checked every storage room, every archive. He was convinced they'd been thrown out during the renovations in the 60s. But they weren't. They were just buried, filed wrong, stored in the wrong place, forgotten. Tom moved closer, looking down at the drawings with something like reverence. Dr. Park, she's good. She knew what to look for, where to look. Found them in about 3 days. Nathan traced his finger along the plastic covering one of the drawings, not quite touching the paper beneath. The detail was extraordinary. His grandfather had drawn individual decorative elements, labeled materials, included notes about light and shadow, and how people would move through the space. This wasn't just architecture. This was storytelling. Can I ask you something, Tom? Sure. You've been here a long time, worked with my dad, knew this building before I ever did. What do you think I should do about the sale? Tom was quiet for a moment, his eyes still on the drawings. That's not really my place to say, Mr. Carter. I'm asking anyway. Well, Tom scratched his jaw, considering. Your dad, he loved this place, poured everything into it, but he also knew when to let go. When he got sick those last few months, he talked a lot about what would happen after, about whether you'd keep the building or sell it, and what that would mean either way. Nathan looked up. What did he say? He said buildings are meant to be used, not preserved like museums. That the best way to honor something is to let it keep serving its purpose, even if that means changing hands. Tom paused. But he also said the only thing that mattered was who you sold to, because buildings take on the character of their owners. They reflect the values of the people who control them. And what are my values? Nathan asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. That's for you to figure out, sir. But I'll tell you this, in the 8 years since your dad passed, you've done right by this place. Kept the tenants happy, maintained the building, protected what needed protecting. Whatever you decide, I trust you've got good reasons. They stood there for a while longer, looking at Arthur Carter's vision of a building that had somehow survived the Depression, World War II, the urban decay of the 70s, and nearly a century of changing economics and values. It should have been demolished a dozen times over. Instead, it was still here, still serving its purpose, still mattering to the people who used it. Nathan's phone buzzed. Emma's school. He checked the time, almost 4. He'd told them he'd be late, but not this late. I need to go, he said. But Tom, can we leave these here? The drawings? They're not going anywhere. Dr. Park set up the whole room for long-term preservation. Tom smiled. They'll be here whenever you want to come back. Nathan took one last look at his grandfather's careful handwriting, the notes about marble sourcing and window specifications, and how the morning light should fall across the lobby floor. Then he turned and headed for the stairs, his mind already shifting to the next thing, picking up Emma, making dinner, helping with homework, all the ordinary pieces of life that continued regardless of billion-dollar decisions. Emma was the last kid waiting when Nathan pulled up to the school. She climbed into the truck with her backpack and that expression that said she had opinions about his tardiness. You're late. I know. I'm sorry, Bug. I was at the building. The fancy building? Yeah. Emma buckled her seatbelt, watching him carefully. Did you see Ms. Langford? I did, a few hours ago. Was she still trying? Nathan pulled out into traffic, thinking about Victoria's face across that conference table, the genuine uncertainty in her voice when she talked about changing. Yeah, she's still trying. Good. Emma pulled out a paper from her backpack. I made this in art class. Miss Patterson said we should draw someone who inspires us. She held up the drawing, and Nathan felt his throat tighten. It was him and Emma, holding hands, standing in front of what was clearly supposed to be Blackstone Plaza. The proportions were all wrong and the colors were chaotic, but the detail was there. His construction jacket, her winter coat, even the snow falling around them. That's beautiful, Em. I know. Miss Patterson said it shows emotional depth. Emma said this very seriously, like she understood what emotional depth meant. She asked why I drew us at the building instead of at home or the park. What did you tell her? I said that's where Daddy stood up to the mean lady who judged us, and that standing up to mean people is inspiring. Nathan had to focus very hard on the road ahead, blinking against the sudden burning in his eyes. You're going to make me crash the truck, Bug. Don't be dramatic, just drive carefully. Emma put the drawing back in her backpack. So what did Ms. Langford want? To show me her new proposal for buying the building. Is it good? It's very good. She did everything I asked for and more. Then you should sell it to her. Nathan glanced over. Just like that? Just like that. Emma shrugged, like billion-dollar decisions were simple when you were 6. She messed up, and then she fixed it. That's what you're supposed to do when you mess up. Fix it. It's more complicated than that, Em. Why? Because what if she's only being nice to get what she wants? What if once the sale goes through, she changes back into the person who spilled coffee on me and acted like we didn't belong there? Emma considered this seriously. Then you'll know she's a liar. But you don't know that yet. Right now you just know she's trying. And Miss Patterson says we should encourage people who try, because trying is hard and giving up is easy. Nathan had to smile despite himself. Miss Patterson is full of wisdom today. She's full of wisdom every day. That's why she's a teacher. Emma looked out the window at the city passing by, the buildings and people in endless movement. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always. Are you scared? About selling Grandpa's building? The question landed heavier than Nathan expected. He could lie, could give some reassuring adult answer about how everything would be fine. But Emma deserved better than that. Yeah, Bug, I'm scared. Why? Because once I sell it, it's not ours anymore. It becomes someone else's responsibility, someone else's decision what happens to it. And what if they don't take care of it the way Grandpa did, the way Dad did? What if I make the wrong choice and the building gets turned into something they wouldn't recognize? But you can't keep it forever just because you're scared, Emma said. That's what Miss Patterson says about the hamster. We can't keep Harvey in his cage forever just because we're scared he'll get hurt in the play area. Sometimes you have to let things be free, even if it's scary. Nathan wasn't sure the hamster building comparison was entirely sound, but Emma had a point. He'd been holding on to Blackstone Plaza partly out of love, partly out of duty, and partly out of fear. Fear that letting go meant betraying his father's memory, his grandfather's vision, everything the building represented. But Tom was right. Buildings were meant to be used, not preserved like museums, and maybe holding on too tight was its own kind of betrayal. That night after Emma was asleep, Nathan spread Victoria's proposal across his kitchen table. His lawyers had reviewed it earlier in the day, called him with their assessment. Everything was solid. The preservation requirements were binding, the tenant protections were enforceable, the community commitments were written into the contract in ways that would survive changes in ownership or management. On paper, it was everything he'd wanted, but paper didn't tell him whether Victoria's transformation was real. Paper didn't guarantee she wouldn't revert to her old self once the deal closed. Paper couldn't protect against the possibility that this was all an elaborate performance designed to get him to sign. Nathan's phone rang. He almost didn't answer, seeing Morrison's name on the screen. It was nearly 10, late for a business call. Mr. Carter, I apologize for the hour. I know it's late. It's fine, Morrison. What's up? I wanted to speak with you off the record. Attorney to attorney, not as Ms. Langford's counsel. Morrison paused. May I be frank? Please. I've worked with Victoria Langford for 6 years. I've watched her build Langford Capital from a small investment firm into one of the most aggressive acquisition companies in the country. She's brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and absolutely committed to winning. Morrison's voice was careful. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand who you're dealing with. Nathan felt his stomach sink. This is the part where you tell me the proposal is a con. No, this is the part where I tell you it's not. Morrison sounded almost surprised by his own words. Mr. Carter, I thought the proposal she brought you was a mistake. A moment of weakness, emotional decision-making that would cost her dearly. I advised her against it, multiple times. But she refused to back down. And more than that, she started applying the same principles to other deals, other acquisitions. She's reworking our entire approach to community impact, preservation, tenant relations. She brought in consultants, hired new staff, restructured our evaluation metrics. This isn't a one-time gesture. This is a fundamental shift in how she does business. Nathan didn't know what to say. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to sign that contract knowing it's legitimate. Victoria Langford is genuinely trying to change how she operates, and your building is the proof of concept. If this works, if she can complete a major acquisition while honoring all these preservation and community commitments, it validates the entire new approach. Morrison paused. But if you don't sign, if you walk away, I'm not sure she'll have the conviction to continue. This proposal is her line in the sand, her declaration that she can do business differently. That's a lot of pressure to put on one decision. I know, and I'm sorry for that, but I thought you deserved to know what this means to her, what it represents. After Morrison hung up, Nathan sat at his kitchen table for a long time, staring at the proposal without really seeing it. Somewhere in the building across town, his grandfather's drawings were laid out under protective plastic, a vision from 1928 that had somehow survived into 2026. And somewhere else in the city, Victoria Langford was probably still awake, probably still working, probably wondering if Nathan would give her the chance to prove she'd changed. The decision should have been obvious. The proposal was good, the terms were fair, the protections were solid. Every rational consideration pointed toward signing, but Nathan wasn't sure he trusted rationality anymore. Not after watching Victoria's face in that conference room, seeing the genuine struggle behind her polished exterior. Not after hearing Morrison's careful assessment of her transformation. Not after Emma's simple wisdom about encouraging people who try. He picked up his phone and typed a message before he could overthink it. Ms. Langford, this is Nathan Carter. I've reviewed the proposal. Can we meet tomorrow? Not at the building, somewhere neutral. The response came back almost immediately, like she'd been waiting by her phone. Of course, where and when? Nathan thought for a moment, then smiled to himself. The coffee shop on the corner of Blackstone Plaza, the one you wanted to relocate, 8 a.m. A pause longer this time. Then, I'll be there. Nathan set down his phone and looked at Emma's drawing, still sitting on the counter where she'd left it. Him and Emma, holding hands, standing in front of the building while snow fell around them. Standing up to mean people is inspiring, she'd said. Maybe giving mean people the chance to become better was inspiring too. The coffee shop was called Rosa's, had been there since the 70s, and served the kind of coffee that made no apologies for being simple and strong and exactly what it claimed to be. Nathan arrived at 7:55, wanting to be early, wanting the advantage of familiar ground. But Victoria was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She stood when Nathan entered, looking uncertain in a way that was becoming familiar. I ordered you a coffee, she said. Black, no sugar. The barista said it's what you usually get. You talked to Rosa? I've been coming here every morning for the past week, trying to understand what this place means to the neighborhood. Victoria gestured to the other cup. She's nice, told me about her daughter's college fund, about the regulars who've been coming here for decades, about the time your father helped her negotiate her lease when the previous owner tried to triple her rent. Nathan sat, taking the coffee. It was perfect, of course. Rosa had been making his coffee the same way for 8 years. Why? He asked. Victoria sat across from him, her own coffee untouched. Because I realized I'd spent a year trying to buy Blackstone Plaza without ever understanding what it actually was. I knew the square footage and the rental rates and the market comparables, but I didn't know Rosa or the bookstore owner who's been there since 1998, or the family that runs the Vietnamese restaurant your daughter probably loves. We go there every Friday, Nathan said. Emma orders the same thing every time, pho with extra lime. Mrs. Nguyen told me. She also told me what you did when she couldn't afford the property tax increase 3 years ago. Nathan felt his face heat. That's not... She shouldn't have told you that. She's grateful. She wanted me to know what kind of person you are, what kind of owner you've been. Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Everyone I talked to had stories like that. The bookstore owner, whose lease you extended at below market rates. The cleaning crew you gave Christmas bonuses to even when the building was barely breaking even. The family on the 12th floor whose rent you froze when the father lost his job. That's just being decent. That's being exceptional. Victoria's voice was soft. And it's exactly what I never learned. My father taught me that business is business, that sentiment is weakness, that the only thing that matters is the bottom line. But you've been running this building at a loss for years, Nathan. Years. Because you cared more about the people in it than the profit it could generate. Nathan didn't know what to say. He'd never thought of it as exceptional, just as the right way to do things, the way his father had done things. The proposal, Victoria continued, all those preservation requirements and tenant protections and community commitments, they're not just legal language. They're promises. To Rosa, to Mrs. Nguyen, to the bookstore owner, to everyone who depends on this building being more than just an investment property. I know, and I'm asking you to trust that I'll keep those promises, even when it's expensive, even when it's inconvenient, even when every business instinct I've ever had tells me to take the easier, more profitable path. Victoria looked directly at him. I'm asking you to believe that I've changed. Nathan took a sip of coffee, buying time. Outside the window, the city was waking up, people hurrying past on their way to work, the snow that had been falling for weeks finally starting to ease. Blackstone Plaza rose in the background, 60 stories of history and hope, and his family's stubborn refusal to let go of things that mattered. I want to believe you've changed, Nathan said finally. I really do. But, Victoria, I've seen people make promises before. I've watched good intentions evaporate the moment they become inconvenient. How do I know you're different? You don't. Victoria's honesty was startling. You can't know, not for certain. All you can do is look at what I've done so far. The proposal, the preservation work, the time I've spent with the tenants learning their stories, and decide whether you think it's genuine. And if I decide it's not, then you don't sign, and I'll have to live with knowing I destroyed any chance at redemption because I couldn't overcome 3 decades of conditioning in 3 weeks. Victoria smiled, but it was sad. But Nathan, if you decide to take the chance, if you decide to trust me, I promise you I will do everything in my power to honor that trust. Not because it's good business, though it might be. Not because it makes me look good, though it might. But because you and your daughter showed me that there's a better way to move through the world than the one I was taught. Rosa came over with the coffee pot, refilling both their cups without asking. You two look serious. Everything okay? We're negotiating, Nathan said. The building sale? Rosa looked at Victoria, her expression guarded. You better take care of this place. Nathan's daddy, he was good people. Nathan's good people. This building matters. I know, Victoria said quietly, and I will. Take care of it, I mean. Rosa studied her for a long moment, the way only someone who'd spent 50 years reading people could study someone. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied. Good, because if you don't, you'll have me to answer to, and I'm a lot scarier than I look. After Rosa left, Victoria laughed despite herself. She is scary. She's protective of the building, of the neighborhood, of the people who matter to her. Nathan finished his coffee. That's what you're buying into, Victoria. Not just square footage and rental income. A community. People who care about each other, who look out for each other, who remember when you do right by them and when you don't. I understand that now. I didn't before, but I do now. Then prove it. Victoria blinked. What? Prove it. Right now. Show me this isn't just words. Nathan pulled out his phone, opened his email, forwarded something to Victoria. That's from the bookstore owner. He's behind on rent because his sales have been down, and he's terrified I'm going to evict him before the sale goes through. What would you do? Victoria checked her phone, read the email, her expression shifting through concern and calculation. Nathan watched her, knowing this was the real test. Not the polished proposal or the carefully worded promises, but this. A real problem requiring a real decision that would cost real money with no guarantee of return. I'd forgive the back rent, Victoria said finally, and I'd work with him to figure out why sales are down, whether there's something we can do to help. Better foot traffic, improved signage, maybe a partnership with local schools to promote literacy programs. That's going to cost you. Less than losing a 30-year institution because I was too cheap to help. Victoria set down her phone. Nathan, I know I'm the last person who should be preaching about community values. I know my track record speaks for itself. But I'm asking you to let me build a new track record, starting with this building, with these people. Nathan looked at her across the small table. This woman who'd humiliated him in a lobby and then spent 3 weeks trying to become someone different. She wasn't perfect. She was still learning, still struggling against every instinct her father had drilled into her. But she was trying, genuinely trying, and maybe that was enough. I need one more thing from you, Nathan said. Anything. I need you to promise me that if this gets hard, if the preservation costs more than you expected, or the community commitments become inconvenient, or your board pressures you to cut corners, I need you to promise that you'll remember this conversation, this coffee shop, these people, why any of this matters. Victoria's eyes were bright. I promise, I swear to you, Nathan, I will remember. Then I'll sign your proposal. The relief on Victoria's face was almost painful to witness. Really? Really? With one addition, I want quarterly meetings with you and the tenant association for the first 2 years. Face-to-face accountability. You tell them directly what you're doing with the building. They tell you directly how it's affecting them. Done. Absolutely done. Victoria was smiling now, genuine and unguarded. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet. Thank me in 2 years when you've actually kept all these promises, and Rosa still likes you. They shook hands across the table and Nathan felt something shift. Not trust. Not quite yet. But the possibility of trust. The foundation for something that might eventually become respect or even friendship. There's one more thing, Victoria said. Your grandfather's drawings. Dr. Park wants to include them in an exhibition she's organizing at the Chicago Architecture Center. A retrospective on Art Deco preservation. I'd like your permission to loan them, and I'd like to fund the exhibition, not as Langford Capital, but personally, as a way of honoring what your family built. Nathan felt that tightness in his throat again. You don't have to do that. I know, but I want to. Your grandfather deserves to be remembered, and this seems like a good way to do it. Then yes, you have my permission. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up outside the window. Eventually, Victoria had to leave for another meeting, had to return to her world of boardrooms and balance sheets and all the responsibilities that came with running a major company. But before she left, she stopped at the counter and talked to Rosa for a few minutes, laughing at something the older woman said. Her whole demeanor relaxed and genuine in a way Nathan had never seen before. Maybe people could change. Maybe 30 years of conditioning could be overcome with enough motivation and genuine desire. Maybe giving second chances wasn't naive. Maybe it was the only way anyone ever got better. Nathan pulled out his phone and texted his lawyer. Draw up the final contract. I'm ready to sign. Then he sat in Rosa's coffee shop, drinking his second cup of the morning, watching Victoria Langford walk back toward Blackstone Plaza with something that looked almost like hope in her step. Emma had been right. Standing up to mean people was inspiring, but giving them the chance to become better, that might be even more important. The contract signing was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in late March, 6 weeks after that morning at Rosa's. Spring was trying to break through Chicago's stubborn winter, the snow finally melting into gray slush that made the streets messy but somehow hopeful. Nathan had insisted on a small ceremony, just the essential people, no press, no spectacle. Victoria had agreed without argument, which itself felt like progress. Emma came with him, missing an afternoon of school because Nathan wanted her there. She'd been part of this from the beginning, sitting in that conference room with her animal book, asking the questions that cracked Victoria's carefully constructed armor. It seemed right that she should see how it ended. The conference room looked different in March light, softer somehow, less intimidating. Or maybe Nathan was just less intimidated, having spent the past 6 weeks in regular contact with Victoria as they worked through final details and contingencies. They talked on the phone at least twice a week, sometimes about business, sometimes about other things. She'd asked about Emma's school play. He'd asked about her restructuring plans for Langford Capital. Slowly, conversation by conversation, Something like friendship had started to form. Victoria was already there when they arrived, talking quietly with Morrison and Dr. Park. She looked up when the door opened and her face transformed into a genuine smile. "Nathan, Emma, thank you for coming." "Wouldn't miss it," Nathan said, "though I'm pretty sure I'm contractually obligated to be here." "Minor detail." Victoria came over, crouching down to Emma's level. "How was school?" "We're learning about ecosystems," Emma announced. "Did you know that removing one species can collapse an entire food chain? Like if you take out wolves, the deer population explodes, and then they eat all the vegetation, and then the whole system falls apart." "I didn't know that." "That's fascinating. It's called a trophic cascade. Miss Patterson says it's important to understand connections." Emma gave Victoria a very pointed look, like how buildings connect to neighborhoods and people connect to communities. Nathan tried not to laugh. Victoria's expression suggested she knew she was being taught a lesson by a 6-year-old and was trying to accept it gracefully. "Miss Patterson sounds very wise," Victoria said. "She is. She also says change is hard but necessary, like how caterpillars have to completely dissolve inside their cocoons before they can become butterflies." Emma paused. "Are you still dissolving, Ms. Langford?" This time Nathan did laugh, couldn't help it. Victoria stood up, her face somewhere between amused and mortified. "I think I'm somewhere between dissolved and reformed," she said. "Still figuring out the wings." Morrison cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should begin. Everyone's here except the notary, and she should arrive any moment." They took their seats around the table, Nathan at one end, Victoria at the other, lawyers and advisors filling the space between. Dr. Park sat off to the side with a leather portfolio that Nathan knew contained photographs of the preservation work already begun. Emma climbed into the chair next to Nathan, pulling out a coloring book that was definitely not about butterflies or ecosystems, but was acceptable anyway. The notary arrived, a brisk woman in her 60s who'd probably witnessed 1,000 signings and found them all equally tedious. She arranged her stamp and documentation with practiced efficiency, while Morrison distributed copies of the final contract. Nathan had read this version a dozen times, had his lawyers review every clause and contingency. But seeing it now, bound and official and waiting for signatures, made it real in a way all those drafts hadn't been. This was it. The moment his family's nearly century-long ownership of Blackstone Plaza would end. "Before we sign," Victoria said, and the room went quiet. "I want to say something." Morrison looked nervous. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. Last-minute complications were the worst kind. "Nothing's wrong," Victoria added quickly, reading the room. "I just want to acknowledge what's happening here. Nathan, you're trusting me with something irreplaceable. Your grandfather's vision, your father's life's work, your family's history. That's not a responsibility I take lightly. I know you don't. And I want you to know that I've been making changes at Langford Capital, significant changes. We've established a new division focused exclusively on preservation acquisitions, buildings with historical or community significance that we can purchase and protect rather than demolish or gut. We're calling it the Carter Initiative." Nathan's throat went tight. "You're naming it after my family?" "After your father, specifically. John Carter understood something most people in my industry never learn, that buildings aren't just assets, they're legacies. They're the physical embodiment of communities and histories and human effort. They deserve to be treated as such." Victoria's voice was steady but emotional. "The initiative will operate on the same principles as this acquisition. Preservation first, community protection, long-term stewardship. And I'm personally funding it for the first 5 years to prove it can work." That's going to cost you millions, Morrison said, not quite under his breath. "It's going to cost me tens of millions," Victoria corrected, "and it's worth every penny." Emma had stopped coloring, listening with that focused attention she reserved for things she deemed important. "That's really nice, Ms. Langford." "Thank you, Emma. I learned it from you and your dad." The signing itself was anticlimactic, as these things usually were. Pages turned, signatures added, initials placed next to clauses and contingencies. The notary stamped and witnessed with mechanical precision. In less than 15 minutes, Blackstone Plaza changed hands. Nathan felt the weight of it settle over him. Not regret exactly, but a profound sense of finality. He'd sold his father's building. His grandfather's dream was now someone else's responsibility. It was done. Victoria must have seen something in his face because she stood and came around the table, extending her hand. "Thank you for trusting me." Nathan shook it, feeling the firm grip, the slight tremor he'd noticed that first day in the conference room. She was nervous too, he realized. Nervous about living up to the promises she'd made, about becoming the person she'd committed to being. "Don't make me regret it," he said, but his tone was light. "I won't. I promise." Dr. Park opened her portfolio, spreading photographs across the table. "Since we're all here, I wanted to show you the preservation work that's already begun. The marble restoration in the lobby, the brass elevator doors being refinished, even some of the office spaces being returned to their original layouts." The photographs were stunning. Nathan had seen some of this work in progress during site visits, but seeing it documented like this, the before and after comparisons, made the transformation visceral. His grandfather's building was being brought back to life, detail by careful detail. "This one's my favorite," Dr. Park said, pointing to a photo of the restored ceiling medallion in what used to be the executive dining room. The original plasterwork was hidden under 6 layers of dropped ceiling. Took us 3 weeks just to safely remove all the modifications without damaging what was underneath. Emma leaned over to look. "It's pretty, like a flower made of fancy swirls." "It's called a rosette," Dr. Park explained. "Very common in Art Deco design. Your great-grandfather specified this exact pattern throughout the building." "Can we go see it? The real one, not just the picture?" Victoria looked at Nathan. "Would you like a tour? See what we've been doing?" The tour took almost 2 hours. Victoria led them through the building floor by floor, pointing out restoration work, explaining timelines, introducing them to the preservation team. Emma asked a million questions, most of which Dr. Park answered with patient enthusiasm. Nathan just walked and looked and tried to process the strange feeling of seeing his family's building transformed while still remaining fundamentally itself. The lobby was the most dramatic change. The marble had been cleaned and resealed, the brass fixtures polished until they gleamed, the Art Deco light fixtures rewired and restored. It looked like it might have looked in 1929, fresh and new and full of possibility. Marcus was at the security desk, watching the tour with unconcealed approval. "Looking good, isn't it, Mr. Carter?" "It really is. Your dad would be proud, both of what you did and what Ms. Langford's doing." Marcus nodded to Victoria. "She's been good to work with, listens to people, makes changes when we point out problems. That's rare." They ended the tour in the basement, in the storage room where Arthur Carter's drawings were still laid out under protective plastic. Victoria had had them professionally framed, Nathan saw, ready for Dr. Park's exhibition at the Architecture Center. "The exhibition opens next month," Dr. Park said. "We're featuring 12 Chicago buildings that have been successfully preserved, and Blackstone Plaza is the centerpiece. Your grandfather's drawings will be displayed alongside contemporary photographs showing how the building has survived and evolved." Nathan traced his finger along the frame, not quite touching. "He'd like that. Being remembered." "He'll be more than remembered," Victoria said quietly. "He'll be studied. Architecture students will learn from his work. Preservationists will use these drawings as examples of Art Deco design at its finest. His vision will influence how buildings are designed and protected for generations." It was more than Nathan had ever imagined for his grandfather's forgotten drawings, more than he'd dared hope when he first decided to sell. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can I show you something?" "Sure, Bug." She led him to one of the drawings, pointing at a small notation in the corner. "Look, it says, 'For my children and their children.' He was thinking about you when he made this." Nathan looked at the careful handwriting, his grandfather's hope captured in ink and paper. "For my children and their children." A building designed to last, to serve, to matter, beyond one lifetime. "Yeah," Nathan said, his voice rough. "I guess he was." The weeks that followed the signing were strange. Nathan kept expecting to feel loss, kept waiting for the regret to hit. But instead, he felt lighter. The building was being cared for, the tenants were protected, the history was being preserved. He'd done right by his father's legacy, and he'd done it by trusting someone who'd given him every reason not to trust her. Victoria called him on a Friday evening, about a month after the signing. Nathan was making dinner while Emma did homework at the kitchen table, the ordinary rhythm of their lives continuing as it always had. "Nathan, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Just making spaghetti. What's up?" I wanted to tell you about the first quarterly tenant meeting, the one we agreed to in the contract. Victoria sounded tired but pleased. It was today. 3 hours of very direct feedback from Rosa, Mrs. Nguyen, the bookstore owner, about 15 others. How bad was it? Surprisingly constructive. They had concerns about the construction timeline, questions about the community space commitments, strong opinions about paint colors for the restored lobby. She paused. Rosa told me I was doing a decent job, but not to get cocky about it. Nathan laughed. That sounds like Rosa. She also told me about what you used to do. The Christmas bonuses, the rent freezes, all the ways you looked out for people. Victoria's voice went soft. You set an impossible standard, you know. These people expect their landlord to actually care about them. And do you? Care about them? I'm learning to. It doesn't come naturally yet, but I'm working on it. She hesitated. Would you consider coming to the next meeting? Not as the owner, you're not anymore, but as someone who knows these people, who they trust. I think it would help. You don't need me there, Victoria. You're doing fine on your own. Maybe, but I'd like you there anyway. For moral support, if nothing else. Nathan glanced at Emma, who was very obviously listening while pretending to focus on her math homework. I'll think about it. Thank you, that's all I can ask. Another pause. How's Emma? She's good. Acing kindergarten, planning to become an ecosystem expert. Tell her I said hi. And Nathan, thank you again for giving me the chance to prove I could change. After the call ended, Emma looked up from her homework. Was that Ms. Langford? It was. Is she still trying? Yeah, Bug, she's still trying. Good. Emma went back to her math, then added without looking up. You should go to her meeting. She needs you. She doesn't need me. She's a billionaire CEO. She's got this handled. Everybody needs somebody, Daddy. That's what makes us human. Nathan had no response to that, so he just finished making dinner and tried not to think too hard about when his 6-year-old had become wiser than him. The architecture exhibition opened on a rainy Saturday in April. Nathan and Emma went to the opening reception, which was more crowded than Nathan had expected. Apparently, Art Deco preservation was having a moment, or maybe people just wanted to see inside the architecture center on a miserable spring day. Arthur Carter's drawings were displayed in the main gallery, beautifully lit and carefully labeled. Nathan stood in front of them for a long time, Emma's hand in his, looking at his grandfather's vision and trying to imagine the man who'd created it, young, ambitious, convinced he could build something that would last. And he had somehow. Against all odds, the building had survived. Nathan. He turned to find Victoria approaching, dressed less formally than usual, looking almost relaxed in slacks and a sweater. She'd brought someone with her, an older man, late 60s, with Victoria's eyes and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. I wanted to introduce you to my father, Victoria said, and Nathan heard the tension in her voice. Charles Langford, this is Nathan Carter. He's the one who sold me Blackstone Plaza. Charles extended his hand with practiced politeness. Mr. Carter, Victoria's told me about the acquisition. Interesting terms. Dad's being diplomatic, Victoria said. He actually called them financially insane. I said they were sentimental, Charles corrected, which in business amounts to the same thing. Nathan shook his hand, taking in the expensive suit, the cold assessment in his eyes. The way he looked at the Art Deco drawings with polite disinterest. This was the man who'd taught Victoria that people were problems to be managed, that buildings were just containers for profit. This was the conditioning she was fighting against. Sentiment has its place, Nathan said carefully. In personal life, certainly. In business, it's a liability. Charles glanced at Victoria. As I've been trying to explain to my daughter for the past month, this Carter initiative of hers, the preservation division, it's going to cost her dearly. It already has, Victoria said. And I'm fine with that. You're fine with it now. Wait until the quarterly reports come in showing reduced profits, until your investors start asking uncomfortable questions, until the board suggests you've lost your edge. Charles's tone wasn't cruel exactly, just matter of fact. Sentiment fades, Victoria. Business realities don't. Emma had been listening to this exchange with growing indignation. Before Nathan could stop her, she stepped forward. Excuse me, Mr. Langford? Charles looked down at her, surprised. Yes? You're wrong about sentiment. Miss Patterson says sentiment is just another word for caring about things, and caring about things is what makes us different from robots. Emma's voice was perfectly polite, perfectly serious. Ms. Langford is trying to be better than she was before. You should be proud of her, not mean about it. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles Langford stared at Emma like she was a particularly bold exotic animal that had wandered into his path. Victoria looked like she was trying not to laugh and cry at the same time. Nathan wanted to sink through the floor. Emma, he managed, that's not... We don't... I'm just saying what's true, Daddy. You told me we should always say what's true, even when it's hard. Charles's expression had shifted into something Nathan couldn't quite read. How old are you, young lady? 6? Almost 7? And what's your name? Emma Carter. That's my great-great-grandfather's drawings you're standing in front of. She pointed at the nearest rendering. He built Blackstone Plaza in 1929 because he wanted to create something beautiful that would help people. That's sentiment, and it lasted almost 100 years. So I think maybe sentiment is stronger than you think. For a long moment, Charles just looked at Emma. Then he turned to Victoria, his expression unreadable. This is the child from the lobby incident. Yes, Victoria said quietly. The one who asked you why you were doing to Carter's building what I did to the Langford Tower. Yes. Charles looked back at Emma, then at the drawings, then at his daughter. Something complicated moved across his face. Recognition, maybe, or regret, or just the uncomfortable realization that a 6-year-old had identified the exact pattern he'd spent 30 years perfecting. She makes a valid point, he said finally. Victoria blinked. What? The child. She makes a valid point about sentiment and longevity. Charles gestured at the drawings. This building survived the Depression, 2 world wars, decades of urban decay. The Langford Tower lasted 60 years before I sold it to developers who gutted it for luxury condos. Perhaps there's something to be said for building with vision rather than just profit margins. Dad, are you feeling okay? Don't be smart, Victoria. I'm simply acknowledging that your approach with Blackstone Plaza may have merit I didn't initially recognize. He looked at Nathan. Mr. Carter, your family built something worth preserving, and my daughter seems committed to doing exactly that. I may not agree with all her methods, but I respect the intention. It wasn't a warm endorsement, wasn't even particularly enthusiastic, but coming from Charles Langford, it was practically a declaration of support. Emma beamed. See? Everybody can learn to be better, even grown-ups. After Charles excused himself to network with other attendees, old habits die hard, Victoria turned to Nathan with an expression of pure bewilderment. Did my father just admit I might be right about something? I think he did. That's never happened before. Not once in 30 years, she looked at Emma. What did you do to him? I just told him the truth, Emma said, shrugging like she hadn't just accomplished the impossible. Can I go look at the other buildings now? Dr. Park said there's one with a turtle mosaic. After Emma wandered off toward the other exhibits, Victoria and Nathan stood together in front of Arthur Carter's drawings, watching people examine them with interest and appreciation. Thank you, Victoria said quietly, for bringing her, for being here. She wanted to come, insisted, actually. She's remarkable, you know, the clarity she has, the way she sees through all the complicated adult nonsense to what actually matters. Victoria paused. I've been thinking about what she said that day in the conference room, about me doing to your building what my father did to his. It wasn't just perceptive, it was the truth I'd been avoiding my whole professional life. And now? Now I'm trying to build something different. The Carter Initiative, the preservation work, the way I'm restructuring Langford Capital. It's all an attempt to prove that you can be successful without being ruthless, that you can do good business while actually doing good. She smiled. Your daughter and your building taught me that. I'm just hoping I can live up to the lesson. Nathan watched Emma across the gallery, pointing excitedly at something in another display, her enthusiasm boundless and unfiltered. She'd taught Victoria Langford something no business school or mentor ever could, that caring about people and places wasn't weakness, it was the whole point. You know what the weird part is? Nathan said. I thought selling the building would feel like losing something, like I was betraying my dad's memory or giving up something I should have fought harder to keep, but instead it feels like the building's finally becoming what it was always meant to be. Which is? A legacy that outlives the people who created it. My grandfather designed it, my father saved it, and you're making sure it survives for the next generation. Nathan looked at Victoria. That's not loss. That's actually kind of perfect. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Your father would be proud of you. I think he'd be proud of both of us. You for learning to care, me for learning to let go. They stood there for a while longer, watching people examine the drawings, listening to conversations about preservation in history and the importance of protecting what matters. Emma came back eventually, dragging Dr. Park with her to explain some detail about limestone restoration that apparently couldn't wait. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and almost hopeful. Nathan took Emma's hand as they walked toward the parking garage, both of them tired but satisfied. Daddy, Emma said, do you think Miss Langford's going to be okay? Like really okay, not just pretending? I think so, Bug. Why? Because she still looks sad sometimes, like she's carrying something heavy that she doesn't know how to put down. Nathan thought about that, about Victoria's careful transformation, her fight against 30 years of conditioning, her father's cold assessment of sentiment and success. Emma was right. Victoria was trying, genuinely trying, but the weight of becoming someone different than you were raised to be wasn't something you just shrugged off. I think she's learning to put it down, Nathan said. It just takes time. We should help her with the putting down part. We already did, Em. We sold her the building. We showed her a different way of doing things. That's enough. But friends help each other, Daddy. That's what Miss Patterson says. And Ms. Langford's our friend now, right? Nathan hadn't thought of Victoria as a friend exactly. Business associate, maybe. Someone he'd decided to trust after considerable convincing. But Emma was right. Somewhere in the past few months, through all the meetings and phone calls and shared commitment to preserving something that mattered, friendship had happened. Yeah, Bug, I guess she is. Then we should invite her to my birthday party. It's in 3 weeks, and I want her to come. Emma, I don't think Ms. Langford, she needs to see that people can be nice without wanting anything, that friends just hang out and eat cake and play games because they like each other. Emma looked up at him with those serious eyes that were too old for her face. Please, Daddy, I already made her a birthday card. How could Nathan argue with that? He called Victoria that evening after Emma was asleep, feeling ridiculous about the whole thing. Nathan, hi. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. This is going to sound weird. Try me. My day included being lectured by a 6-year-old in front of my father, so my tolerance for weird is pretty high right now. Nathan laughed despite his nervousness. Emma wants to invite you to her birthday party. It's in 3 weeks, Saturday afternoon, probably at our house, or maybe the park if the weather's nice. Just kids and their parents, nothing fancy, cake and games and the kind of chaos that comes with a dozen 7-year-olds hopped up on sugar. Victoria was quiet for so long Nathan thought the call had dropped. Victoria, you there? I'm here. Sorry, Her voice was thick. Nathan, are you serious? Emma's serious, which means I'm serious. You don't have to come, obviously. I know it's probably not your kind of thing, and you're busy, and I'd love to come. You, really? Really? I've never been invited to a child's birthday party before. My own birthdays growing up were formal affairs with catered food and uncomfortable dresses. This sounds infinitely better. She paused. What does one bring to a 7-year-old's birthday party? Emma would say your presence is enough. I'd say nothing expensive. Maybe a book or art supplies. She's really into drawing ecosystems right now. I can work with that. Victoria's voice was warm, genuine. Thank you, Nathan, for including me, for letting me be part of your lives. Thank you for giving us a reason to include you. The birthday party was exactly the controlled chaos Nathan had expected. 12 kids, sugar, noise, and enough energy to power a small city. They'd ended up at the park because the weather had finally turned properly spring, and Nathan figured if the kids were going to destroy anything, better it be public property than his living room. Victoria showed up looking completely out of place in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, carrying a wrapped present and an expression of barely contained panic. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals, she told Nathan quietly. Why am I terrified of 12 children? Because children are honest and billion-dollar deals aren't, Nathan said. You'll be fine. Just Just don't let them sense fear. Emma spotted Victoria and ran over, her party dress already stained with cake frosting. Ms. Langford, you came! Of course I came. Happy birthday, Emma. Victoria handed her the present, looking genuinely nervous about whether she'd chosen right. Emma tore into it with the efficiency of a child who knew presents were temporary and wrapping paper was meaningless. Inside was a beautiful sketchbook with thick, high-quality paper and a set of professional colored pencils. For your ecosystem drawings, Victoria explained. The pencils are artist grade, so the colors are more vibrant, and the paper can handle detailed work without bleeding. Emma's eyes went wide. This is amazing! Thank you! She threw her arms around Victoria's waist in an unselfconscious hug that clearly caught Victoria completely off guard. For a second, Victoria just stood there, frozen, like she didn't know what to do with this small person expressing uncomplicated affection. Then slowly, carefully, she hugged Emma back, and Nathan saw her eyes close, saw something in her expression shift and soften. When Emma ran off to show her friends the new sketchbook, Victoria stood very still, looking like she'd just experienced something profound and slightly overwhelming. You okay? Nathan asked. Yeah, I don't think anyone's hugged me like that since I was a child myself. No agenda, no performance, just genuine affection. She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. Your daughter is teaching me what I've been missing. The party continued around them, kids playing tag, parents chatting in clusters, someone's phone playing pop music from a portable speaker. Normal, ordinary, the kind of community gathering that happened in parks across the city every weekend. Victoria watched it all with the fascination of an anthropologist studying an unfamiliar culture. Rosa showed up halfway through with homemade pandolts because of course she did. Mrs. Nguyen brought spring rolls. The bookstore owner brought books for all the kids. This was the community Nathan had grown up in, the one his father had carefully nurtured through decades of running Blackstone Plaza, the one Victoria was now responsible for protecting. At one point, Emma dragged Victoria into a game of tag, and Nathan watched a billionaire CEO run around a park playground being chased by 7-year-olds, laughing genuinely for maybe the first time since he'd met her. This was Victoria without the armor, without the careful control, just a person learning to be part of something bigger than herself. Charles Langford would probably have a heart attack if he could see his daughter, right now. As the party wound down and parents started collecting their exhausted children, Victoria helped Nathan clean up, gathering discarded paper plates and cups with the same focus she probably brought to board meetings. Thank you for inviting me, she said, stuffing trash into a garbage bag. I know this probably seemed like a weird thing to include me in. Emma insisted, and she was right. You needed this. I did. I really did. Victoria tied off the garbage bag, looking around at the park, the families heading home, the evidence of a perfectly ordinary celebration. I've spent my whole life chasing success without ever understanding what it was for. Money, power, influence, I had all of it. But I didn't have this. Community, connection, people who cared about me for reasons that had nothing to do with what I could do for them. You have it now, if you want it. I want it. I'm just not sure I know how to keep it. Nathan picked up the last of the decorations, folding the birthday banner Emma had insisted on making by hand. You keep it the same way you've been doing everything else these past few months. You show up, you try, you care about people even when it's inconvenient or expensive or goes against every instinct you were taught. You become someone worth caring about in return. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Your father taught you well. He taught me that buildings are just buildings unless they serve the people in them. That success is meaningless if it comes at the cost of your humanity. That the only legacy worth leaving is the one that makes other people's lives better. Nathan looked at her. You're learning the same lessons, just later than I did. Better late than never? Exactly. They walked back to where Emma was showing her new sketchbook to the few remaining kids, explaining with great enthusiasm about trophic cascades and keystone species. Victoria watched her with an expression Nathan had seen before, on his father's face when he talked about the building, on his own face when he looked at Emma. Love mixed with responsibility, mixed with hope. Nathan, Victoria said quietly, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think people can really change? Not just behavior modification or strategic adjustment, but fundamental change in who they are? Nathan thought about the woman who'd spilled coffee on him and questioned his fitness as a parent. Thought about the woman who'd walked out of a conference room and spent 3 weeks rewriting a billion-dollar proposal. Thought about the woman currently standing in a park at a 7-year-old's birthday party, asking questions that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with becoming someone different. I think people can change if they want it badly enough, he said. If they're willing to do the hard work of examining who they are and deciding they want to be better. Most people aren't willing to do that work. But you are. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you didn't just write a check to make the lobby incident go away. Because you've spent months restructuring your entire company based on what a 6-year-old said to you in a conference room. Because you keep showing up even when it's uncomfortable. Nathan smiled. You've already changed, Victoria. You're just waiting for permission to believe it. Victoria's eyes were bright again, that perpetual edge of tears she seemed to carry these days. I don't know how to be this person yet. The one who cares, who shows up, who values people over profit. I keep waiting to revert to old patterns, to wake up one day and realize I've become my father after all. Then don't do it alone. Let people help you. Rosa, Mrs. Nguyen, the bookstore owner, they're all rooting for you. So are Emma and I. You don't have to figure this out in isolation. I'm not used to accepting help. I know. But that's part of the change, too. Learning that needing people isn't weakness, it's just being human. Emma ran over, her face flushed and happy. Daddy, can Ms. Langford come to dinner with us? We're going to the Vietnamese restaurant, and Mrs. Nguyen said she'd make her special spring rolls. Nathan looked at Victoria, raising an eyebrow. You up for more community immersion? Victoria smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way Nathan hadn't seen before. I'd love to. They walked to the restaurant together, the three of them, through streets that were slowly coming alive with spring. Emma chattered the whole way about her party, about her presents, about her plans to draw an entire ecosystem in her new sketchbook. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at Emma's enthusiastic explanations. Mrs. Nguyen greeted them at the door with warm hugs and immediate judgment about whether they'd dressed warmly enough for the spring evening. She seated them at the best table, brought them tea without asking, and disappeared into the kitchen to make food they hadn't ordered but would definitely eat. She does this, Nathan explained to Victoria. You don't order at Mrs. Nguyen's, you just trust that whatever she brings will be perfect. I'm learning to trust, Victoria said. It's getting easier. The spring rolls arrived. Then pho, then other dishes Nathan didn't recognize but that smelled incredible. They ate and talked and watched the restaurant fill with other families, other regulars, the community that had existed in Blackstone Plaza's shadow for decades. At one point, Mrs. Nguyen came over to check on them, patting Victoria's hand with maternal approval. You taking good care of the building. I see the work you doing. Your heart is in the right place now. After she left, Victoria looked at Nathan with wonder. Did I just get Mrs. Nguyen's approval? You did. That's worth more than any business award, trust me. I believe you. They stayed until Emma started falling asleep in her chair, full of good food and birthday cake, and the particular exhaustion that comes from being loved well. Nathan paid, though Mrs. Nguyen tried to refuse, and they walked back toward where they'd parked, moving slowly through the spring evening. At Victoria's car, she turned to Nathan with an expression that was vulnerable and hopeful and scared all at once. I know I've thanked you before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me that there's a better way to live than the one I was taught. Thank you for letting me be part of your family's legacy. She paused. And thank you for becoming my friend when I did nothing to deserve it. You earned it, Nathan said simply, by doing the work, by showing up, by caring. I'm going to keep showing up. I promise you that. For the building, for the tenants, for the community, for the person I'm trying to become. I know you will. Victoria got in her car, but before she drove away, she rolled down the window. Same time next month, the quarterly tenant meeting? I'll be there. Good. I need my moral support. She smiled. And Nathan, tell Emma thank you for the birthday invitation. It was the best party I've ever been to. Nathan watched her drive away, then carried his sleeping daughter to his truck. Emma stirred as he buckled her in, opening her eyes briefly. Ms. Langford had fun at my party. She did, Bug. You made her really happy. Good. She needs more happy. Emma yawned, already drifting back to sleep. Everybody needs more happy. Driving home through the quiet streets, Nathan thought about everything that had happened since that snowy morning in February. The coffee, the confrontation, the slow transformation of a woman who'd spent 30 years becoming someone she didn't want to be. The building sold, the legacy preserved, the community protected. His phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Victoria. Thank you again for everything. You changed my life. Nathan typed back, You changed your own life. I just showed you it was possible. The light turned green and Nathan drove on, toward home and whatever came next. Behind him, Blackstone Plaza rose into the spring night, its Art Deco features illuminated, Arthur Carter's vision still standing after nearly a century. His grandfather had built something that lasted, his father had protected it, and Nathan had found someone who would honor it. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything a legacy was supposed to be, not frozen in time, but alive and evolving and serving the next generation. Emma was right, Nathan thought. Everybody needs more happy. And sometimes happy comes from the unexpected places, from second chances and hard conversations, and the courage to become better than you were taught to be. Sometimes happy comes from a 6-year-old who sees the world clearly enough to ask the questions nobody else will. Sometimes happy comes from selling something you love to someone who learns to love it too. Sometimes happy comes from standing up to mean people and then giving them the chance to stop being mean. Nathan pulled into his driveway, carried Emma inside, tucked her into bed still wearing her party dress because some nights it wasn't worth the fight. He looked in on her one last time before heading to his own room, saw her new sketchbook on the nightstand next to her animal encyclopedia. Tomorrow she'd probably fill half of it with ecosystems and trophic cascades and all the connections that held the world together. Tonight she just slept, dreaming whatever dreams 7-year-olds dream, innocent and certain that people could change if they wanted to badly enough. Nathan hoped she'd keep that certainty, that clarity, that fundamental belief in human goodness even when faced with human cruelty. He hoped the world wouldn't teach her differently. But if it tried, well, he'd just have to show her what he'd learned from Victoria Langford and what Victoria had learned from them. That change is possible, that caring matters more than success, that buildings and people deserve second chances, that legacy isn't about what you accumulate, but what you give away and how you give it, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust someone who hasn't earned it yet, and then help them become someone who has. Outside, spring continued its slow reclamation of Chicago, melting the last of winter, bringing new growth, proving once again that nothing stays frozen forever. Everything changes. The question is just whether it changes for the better or the worse. Nathan thought about Victoria's face at Emma's birthday party, laughing as she was chased by 7-year-olds, looking more alive than he'd ever seen her. Better, he decided. Definitely better.